I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe we are all self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and there's something extra special happening on the podcast today. I have my first ever recurring guest host here, Em Schulz, everybody. You may know Em from the podcast, and that's why we drink. They've also been on Self-Helpless a couple times. Most recently, Em was on for an episode sharing a ton of incredible tips and hacks for people who have ADHD, which we got so much positive feedback, not only about the topic of that episode, but also about Em as a guest. Em is also a close friend of mine. We have a blast together. We're both very passionate about podcasting, and we are really excited about co-hosting some episodes of Self-Helpless together, starting with this one. So today, Em and I are talking about gut instinct versus self-sabotage. How do you know which is which? Like, we all get feelings about things, but have you ever doubted, was that my gut instinct kicking in? In which case, awesome, great. Or was that a trauma response and I just completely self-sabotaged my entire life trajectory? You know, ever been there? All right. So we're discussing things we've learned on the internet about these topics, and also sharing a variety of our own personal experiences around gut instinct and self-sabotage, and really how we are best able to decipher which we're experiencing at a given time to help us around our own decision making, and also when and how to act on these feelings as well. So here we go. And thank you for being the first ever guest host of the Self-Helpless podcast. How does it feel to make history today? I'm just curious.
I mean, I can't go anywhere. I assume that's how it's going to play out. I just, everywhere they're going to go, oh my God, self-helpless, self-helpless, self-helpless. I know. So I'm allowing it to become part of my new identity. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. By the way, I feel like every time I see you, I'm wearing this same cardigan, and it is not intentional. I just feel like, I don't know, when I see you, it's like, it's comfy, cozy time. We sit on the couch, we drink tea. You know what I mean? And so
I'll take it, because I was gonna roast you for a bit, where like I see you at least once a week. So like, in case people need to know how often you're talking about. But no, I'm gonna ride that wave. So
yeah. I am a minimalist, but I do own more than one sweater. It just happens to be my go-to. Oh my gosh. So today we're talking about self-sabotage and gut instinct, and what they are, how to tell the difference, moments in our life where we either knew like why we were doing something or we didn't. Maybe we can reflect back now and understand it was self-sabotage or gut instinct. Maybe we went for it, maybe we ignored it. I don't know.
yeah.
Gonna get weird.
I had such a tough time with this topic because I think it made me reconsider what my definition of both things are. I think I had just kind of said them whimsically in different conversations and didn't really realize the connection between the two of them.
Yes.
So it scared me, because I was like, oh, this is my first time guest hosting, so I better nail it. And then I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about at all. So
you self-sabotaged about this episode.
I did. Oh, I actually did, because I also procrastinated, because I was like, well, which was its own journey, because I was like, well, why am I doing it? And should I talk about it on the show? And so it became a whole therapy session in my own room in the middle of the night. So thank you.
It's so interesting. I also procrastinated. And you know what? I sometimes even have a hard time with that. Like, am I procrastinating because I'm leaving something to the last minute, and therefore, if it doesn't go super well, I can say, well, I didn't even really try, or didn't even really give myself the time. So, I don't have to face it. Like, if I really tried hard and I put a lot of effort into it and it didn't like go the way that I wanted, then I have to like face that about myself. Or like, on the other hand, I'm really working on my perfectionistic tendencies, and I tend to give too much time to things and overanalyze and all of that. So for me, is like, well, is giving a little bit less time to something that you would normally stress over actually a good thing? and not really self-sabotage. And it's actually, you know, you're just trying to trust yourself more. So,
and perfectionism is one of the signs of self-sabotage, right?
yes, exactly.
Whoops.
Right. Right. So it's like, is me procrastinating just helping my perfectionism a little bit? So is it actually a good thing? We don't know.
Wow, what a twisted roller coaster that is. It's
a
like
mind fuck. Yes.
Yeah, I had kind of the opposite situation where I've obviously been on your show before and don't know how to shut up about
You crushed it, by the way. People loved your episode.
Oh,
People
thank you.
loved your episode. Yeah.
Well, I'm about to do it again. I hope
Yes.
everyone feels the same way. But last time I was here, I wouldn't shut up about my ADHD, and unfortunately I'm here to do it again. And I feel like that's a huge part of it because a lot of ADHD symptoms are in its own right self-sabotage, where you're overindulging in some way, overspending, overeating, doing anything to chase that dopamine rush. And then there's also the complete opposite side, which is task paralysis and procrastination and being very indecisive, and all of it comes back to bite you in the ass. And so I'm like, oh my God, is ADHD just a walking self-sabotage condition? And that messed with me a little bit because I really wanted to do a good job today. Not only, it'd be one thing if I was going onto someone's show and I like never have to see them again, but you're one of my best friends. So I'm like, oh shit, I really have to I have to look you in the eye after this. So I better do it right. Oh my
gosh. Anything you do will be incredible. That's just who you are.
Thank you. After this, we're going to have tea together and you're going to go, anyway, I might not be putting that episode out. But the procrastinating element, which I do in everything, but because I was procrastinating about researching self-sabotage, was its own mindfuck, where I was like, oh, what I ended up going on TikTok and seeing a lot of like why people procrastinate, blah blah blah. And you know, it definitely it's something I'll have to work on in therapy, because I think it all roots down to like some sort of like intelligence complex I have, where I don't think I'm smart enough to do it. So if I wait until I do it that I'm in a way that it might turn out badly, then it's like that self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, see, I knew I couldn't do it, you know?
Right. It's interesting. I was going to ask you about this exact thing because I saw the procrastination and I know that's a big ADHD thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, what if it's not self-sabotage? What if that's just how your brain works, where that you kind of kick in to do something when the deadline is more real, and it's actually not self-sabotage. It's actually just how you do your best work. Or, how do you know?
I don't. I feel like it, like in some ways I do my best work when I'm on a time crunch, and I actually probably would have given you less quality work if I started earlier. I always noticed if I turned in a paper early in high school, it was actually worse than if I did it the night before. And so I think I need the motivation of fear and the motivation of like public embarrassment if this doesn't go well. Like I really need to be incredibly motivated where it's a now or never situation.
Yeah.
But I also, it really does come down to like, I think maybe I'm afraid of failure in some way, and I keep pushing it off until like I have this like jolt of creativity hit me, and sometimes it never comes, and now it's too late and I just have to do what I can. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, we'll talk more about it as we go on.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to dig into this. It's like, hey, if you ever have anything really important coming up and you need somebody to threaten you to get you motivated, I'll send you some texts. Just
thank you.
Just we'll have some canned responses that I can pull from for you. Okay.
I don't think you realize how helpful that'd be.
People be like, this is a very abusive relationship. No, I asked her to do this to me.
Yeah. It's absolutely a medical requirement, some might say.
Allison will be like, I'm sorry, this is not good. Not a good friendship. So, okay, kind of a general overview, like some basic definitions. And I got all this stuff from the platform Believe in Mind. So if you want to do more reading, you can. But self-sabotage is when you undermine your own success or happiness, often unconsciously, and your gut instinct refers to your intuitive judgment about a situation. And the key difference is that self-sabotage works against you, while trusting your gut can guide you in the right direction. So your gut instinct feels more neutral and matter of fact. But both can make you second guess yourself, but for very different reasons. So yeah, self-sabotage has like that, I guess, I don't know, for lack of a better term, icky feeling, anxious maybe.
It's shamey. It feels a little shamey where you're like,
Yes.
I already know I'm about to do something I won't tell my friends about because if I tell them, they're gonna rip me apart.
Yeah. And then
or
your
even
gut. Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say, yeah, and then your gut just kind of is like, I know this and I don't really know why, but I just know it. Right?
Yeah.
Like less open-ended in a way. And back and forth.
The way that because I'm someone who gets a lot of gut feelings, but interestingly, they're never really about anything. They're almost always about something really positive. So maybe that's why I was having my own difficulty like associating the two, because self-sabotage is like only negative in my mind and gut feelings are only good in my mind. But which I asked a bunch of people their definitions too. Everyone has a different answer. So maybe it's good that we're doing this, because maybe nobody knows one of my girlfriend, actually, or a friend of mine, my girlfriend said that for her, a gut feeling is the angel on your shoulder and self-sabotage is the devil on your shoulder.
Ooh.
And I was like, that's interesting. She feels like one is guiding her and the other one's the temptation, saying, but it'd be more fun this way.
Ooh, I love that. That's a really simple way to put it. I like that. I need simple takeaways, because sometimes like too vague of definitions or too like scientific, you lose me,
Yeah.
But that's such an easy, like that's easy imagery and stuff too.
And I don't know. It kind of aligned. It helped me see where she's coming from, at least. It was a nice learning exercise in our relationship. But I guess for her, a gut feeling is very moral and just and maybe the hard thing to do. Whereas, the self-sabotage is, well, it won't be as it won't be fundamentally helpful to you, but we could do it. Why not? Like, it'd be a fun little whim, wouldn't it?
Right.
For me, I feel like someone put it out. I did all of my research on TikTok. I'm so sorry. I'm not the researcher you thought I was, but
this is perfect because I don't really do TikTok and I need somebody who does.
You do the peer-reviewed journals. I'll do like what the people are saying. And
I love it.
Someone described it as an emotional, when you're threatened and you respond with like a fight or flight. There's also freeze or fawn, which get talked less about. But self-sabotage is an emotional fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, when your brain wants to resist the danger of a new experience. So it's like a coping mechanism that you've grown out of, where like it doesn't work anymore because you're not a little kid. So something has to be put in its place for you to grow. And it's your brain too scared of the unknown and would rather keep you in misery that it knows versus happiness that could be out there.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, it's keeping you safe, even though it fucking sucks. There is a purpose, it's keeping you alive, even if what you've been surviving in isn't actually very healthy, but you've been surviving, so it wants to keep you there.
At least it knows that it can survive that. It doesn't know the potential threat of any other outcome. So
exactly. I like this idea of like, gut instinct, the angel on your shoulder, because even if your gut reaction is something kind of like repulsive, right? Like you're feeling nauseous about something, it does not feel like a good feeling. It is trying to guide you towards something that is a good thing for you. So I think that's a cool way to put it. I really like that.
Even when it's because I feel like a lot of gut feelings are either like, it's always a knowing or some sort of, to me, it always felt like a cosmic sort of intuition of like,
yes,
it is not in my control, which a lot of people I think mix up. Like, am I having an anxiety attack right now? Or is this a real gut instinct I should follow? Is this a real lead that I should go with?
Right.
And I feel like for me, the difference is that one is very bodily involved and the other one, your body isn't in it at all. Where
like too heady. The other one is like,
like anxiety feels like panicky. You could feel it like physiologically in your body. You're overthinking. And with a gut feeling, there's never been overthinking. It just, for me, it's just like almost like I'm calm all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, I know what's to be, which feels very woo woo. But
No, I
I feel
love
like there
it.
are moments that we've all had where something told us, get out of there. You're in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And even though like that's not necessarily a calm situation, there's just like there's no need to overthink it. I just know this feeling. And so
Yeah.
it feels a little more grounded. Um, and I feel like with
Yes.
self-sabotage, that kind of is one of the subsections of anxiety where I would feel it all through my body. And I'd already be making a plan about how I'm going to tell people a different version of the story to avoid getting yelled at for not doing the right thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we had Kira Sultanovich as a guest on the podcast, and she talked about how she was driving in a car with her friend, and there was a car really far away, but she just knew she needed to pull over. Something just came over, like, oh, we got to pull over. Something's not right. And then the car ended up, I think there was some kind of crash or something, or they came over the line. So if she had not pulled over, they would have been hit and potentially not survived the accident. But there was no way for her to logically know why she had to pull to the side of the road.
Right.
But, she's like, yeah, I probably picked up on something that I just didn't understand yet. Obviously I observed maybe that the car looked a little weird or wasn't driving normally, but I wasn't cognizant of it. So just like, yeah, not only having the gut reaction, but acting on it is a different thing. You could have it and then talk yourself out of it. Like, it's probably fine. I don't want my friend to think I'm a weirdo. So I'm just going to keep going and then get into an accident potentially. Yeah.
There's this is where if anyone's coming over from my podcast to hear me on this, they're gonna laugh a little bit because my co-host on my podcast, and that's why we drink, my co-host Christine all the time talks about this one book that like changed her life, and I haven't read it, so I'm pitching it on her behalf.
Ooh, I'm gonna write this down.
It's called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker.
Ooh.
And it talks about, because a lot of times we'll get into conversations about, is your gut feeling a cosmic connection with something in the world? Or is it, like you said, these little micro pieces of information we don't even realize we're suddenly catching on to that are keeping us safe?
Yes,
and
I've thought about that too.
And she has always pitched this book where, especially because we're a true crime podcast, The Gift of Fear is basically very much endorsing that you follow your gut, because you don't realize how much you are subconsciously picking up on that. There's so many times that even in the true crime cases that we've covered, people say something like, I don't know what it was about him, I just didn't like him, or I don't know what it is, but I just had to get out of that room. And then it always ends up saving their lives. And so there's these tiny pieces of information that we don't even realize we're picking up on a regular basis that sit in our heads, and we know something. And anyway, just a pitch to a book.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I wrote it down. Can't wait to read it. Well, it's so interesting. So like the example, with Kira seeing that car, not realizing that something was off, but she obviously picked up on something, we think, right? Observed something. Then I also have an experience of like when I first started dating Cam, I felt it's almost like I heard a voice inside of me that just says, this is your husband. Like it didn't even feel like it came from me. I know that sounds really nutty to some people.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. And so for me, I'm like, okay, where the fuck did that come from though? Because I don't have any past experience to draw from. I've never had a husband. I don't know what it feels like to meet one. Right. Like this is my first one. And this was only like 6 weeks, I think, into dating him, where I had dated multiple people before him and never had any experience like that with really lovely men, that I easily could have probably thought, oh, this is the guy. So like, what the fuck is that? That didn't even feel like my thoughts or me. That felt like that kind of cosmic thing that you mentioned versus I was observing something that I wasn't aware of.
I mean, I've had so many moments exactly like that where, this apartment, when we went apart. You know how you get the feeling of a home, like, when you're
Yes.
and like that also doesn't make a lot of sense because sometimes you're looking at a house and you're like, this is not what I would have expected for myself, but something in you is like, this is the one, it's the one. Or
Yeah.
my own co-host, when I first met her, I had a I didn't get a this is your husband, but I did get this really weird draw to her. We had never spoken. We met in grad school. I walked into the classroom for the very first time and my eyes locked in on her. And at first I thought it was like I must have a crush on her or something. I don't know what
Yeah.
it was because there was something wanted me to focus in on her. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm gonna go talk to her after class and like introduce myself. And I got this weird feeling to this day. I can't explain it, but something just said, not yet, not yet. And I was like, that's weird. Why would that?
Weird.
So I just kind of ignored her because I was like, well, I don't know. I just got a weird feeling that maybe she's busy and she has to run off, or maybe I sensed something. And anytime I tried to talk to her, it just always felt a little weird, but I still had this weird draw to her. And we didn't become our own friends until 2 years later, and we started a podcast together. It's
That
just
is
very
so
weird how things
strange.
it's weird that it doesn't even make sense in your body. Like, how would I know that?
Yes. Yes. So interesting. That
Hmm.
reminds me of when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go to college. I'd gotten into two different ones, and one was objectively more prestigious than the other. It was Berkeley. Okay. So it was like,
Okay. Wow.
right. It was Berkeley. And it definitely like my family was excited. If I shared it with people, they definitely were excited about it. I had also been offered a scholarship to go there. And the other school that I got into was UC Santa Barbara, which, definitely is still a good school, but not like that Berkeley prestigious thing.
It's
But
not the thing you can say snootily to somebody. You can't say fuck you at the end.
and it's like, look, no scholarship at Santa Barbara, right? They don't have some of the things that were really sexy, I guess, when you could share about Berkeley. But I just felt better on that campus for whatever reason. Both beautiful campuses, right? A lot of cool opportunities, but just being being on the Santa Barbara campus, I was like, I just have to go here. I know it maybe doesn't make sense based on the checklist that we have, but this is where I want to be. And of course, that's where I ended up, obviously making great friends, but finding stand up that catapulted me into this whole weird, like, creative career trajectory that I 1,000% would not have found at Berkeley. They didn't have that program. And Santa Barbara had this comedy show that was really popular. So it's like, I don't even know why I had to go there. And of course, there was some logistical reasons that were great for it too. It was, closer to home and stuff, but it was just a feeling. And people are surprised because knowing me, they're like, you would totally fit in at Berkeley. You're basically, I got the hippie vibe, right?
Okay, I don't mean to be so like story heavy early on in
No,
this, but
please. This is what I
but this
love.
was this was like one of the stories I like had as like a star to like please. But it's so weird, especially as we're getting to know each other. I still feel like you're one of my closest friends, and sometimes you just say something where it's just so eerily similar to my life.
Yes.
I had this written down to talk about later, but probably the biggest gut feeling I've ever had. It felt like cinematic. The world stopped. Kind of. It was so weird. It was so weird.
Yeah.
I was not ever going to make it into Berkeley, and the best I could do was a school called Christopher Newport University in Virginia. So
Love it.
wide range on our education levels here, but there it's a big school in Virginia, and I I didn't totally even qualify for that. That was my stretch school. The other one, which I'd already gotten into, was Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. Just to
Love
give you
it.
an
Good
an
old
idea.
Farmville. Love it.
And the only things other than college in Farmville was a Buffalo Wild Wings and a laundromat. And
What else do you need, though, really?
I mean, you've got your basics covered. But I wanted to get into CNU, but this was after I had heard of it. My mom was trying to, I think, kind of push um my education. I think she was saying like, "Oh, let me show you a really good college, so you'll work extra hard senior year, so you can get into a good school." And she was really trying to push for me to go somewhere that like wasn't just a laundromat.
Yeah.
And she brought me to CNU, where I ended up going. But at the time, I was just like, a punk 16-year-old who didn't really care. Education was never something I was very good at. I was like kind of like a B average student, but I had to try really hard for that.
Mhm.
And she drove me to CNU and said, let's just go on a tour and just show you like what a college campus looks like. And for someone who did not care about any of this, didn't even care about CNU, I'd already gotten into Longwood. So I was like, I'm already set. I'm done studying. I'm just going to coast senior year and just like go to a college and do the college thing. As soon as I opened the door, we pulled in, we parked, we opened the door. As soon as my foot touched the pavement, like I wasn't even out of the car, I had this like out of body, full blown if there was something cosmically connected to this, it was like everyone just like showed up all at once and screamed at me. And it
Oh,
was just like, you're
weird.
going here. And it was such a full intuitive knowing, which
Yeah.
this sounds like such a small event at the end of the day, but I remember telling my mom, "Oh, I'm going here." And I think she thought like, "Oh, I love this place. I'm obviously going to go." I was
Yeah.
trying to tell her with everything I had, I don't even have to worry about it. I'm just going to apply. I know I'm getting in, even though I do not qualify, even though my GPA is not high enough, even though my grades aren't good enough. I just know I'm going. And my
Oh,
mom was like,
weird.
"Wait, wait, 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 wait. Like, you're actually not smart enough for this. You have to think this one through." And I was like, it doesn't matter to me. I never had a concern about it. When I applied, I ended up getting waitlisted, and it ended up being like the only school other than Longwood I applied to. So my mom was really panicking that I might not make it in. And the whole time I was like, I'm not even stressed. I know I'm going here. And the first day of college, I had that exact same feeling when I walked into my first classroom. And for some reason, my brain just locked in on this one chair. And it said, you have to sit there. You have to sit in this chair. And I remember sitting down and even thinking, I feel like I should remember this one day because this is such a weird out of body experience
Yeah.
that I have to remember this exact chair in this exact room just so I can tell the story later. So I remember it was in McMurrin Hall, room 257, and I was sitting right there. And I knew no one else was sitting there yet, but something said whoever's about to sit down is the beginning of the trajectory of where you're going.
And this is at the school that which school is this at? The one
This
that
was at CNU, the one that I ended up going to. And this
okay.
was the first day, the very first class, or it was like orientation. It was like before school even started. It was the moment I had to sit in a classroom there. I had the same feeling.
Oh my
And
God.
it said, who,
Before you tell me about this moment, because I'm so curious about it,
what?
how did you end up getting in? Because you said you were waitlisted and all that stuff.
I just got in. I don't know what
They
to
just
tell you.
accepted. You have no idea. There was no
Nope.
like magical essay you wrote them or anything like
No,
that. It was just like, nope, I'm
I
going
was
here.
just
That's
like,
it.
I'm gonna be one of the below average people you take in. I just know. And they just
Wow. Okay, that's
um
wild. Okay. Back to this moment.
I had no right being there. I don't know what it was. I just ended up there. And even when I got in, I feel like a lot of people are super stoked when they get into the college of their dreams. I didn't even have like a yay. I just opened it up and I went, I told you. Like
That's so interesting.
it was just so like not anything other than such a sure feeling for me.
Right.
Then I go there on the first day and it's set. I get this feeling of like whoever's going to sit next to you is going to be like the direction you go. Um, and the first person to sit down ended up being my very first girlfriend. And by being with her, just in the way that the butterfly effect works, I ended up meeting the next person, the next person, the next person, and the only reason that it all worked out, where I even moved to LA, ended up getting a podcast. The whole chain of events started with meeting her. And
Wow.
so it's just so weird how the world works. Like it was, and which I'm not even someone who totally believes in like a predestined timeline but it's moments like that where I'm like, maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, I don't know. It was just too creepy to not keep my eye on.
It's incredible. It is really weird when you do have those gut feelings. It's like it's undeniable
Hmm.
and it's so strong that you do act on it. I think
Yeah.
for me, any experience where it's like, okay, it's a little bit wishy-washy. I don't really know. I don't really know if I should do anything or say anything. I usually don't. And I'm able to talk myself out of it. But when something is that strong, it's like I don't even try to talk myself out of it because
Me either.
I know with every fiber of my being. I've told this on the podcast before, and I'm sure I've told you as well. Like when I knew that somebody was about to die in my family, I'm sorry to
Hmm.
go there, kind of morbid, but Cam was next to me. I was in my bedroom, and it was just a full body feeling, knowing, and he was. I wouldn't usually tell Cam something like this. He's not really into that stuff, but I had to because I was like visibly, affected by it. I was like, yeah, I don't know how to tell you this or how I know, but like somebody is about to die in my family.
What a fun anyway, good night. Like
anyway, let's have sleep time. Fun day. Yeah, and within a week or less, my grandfather passed away. But and he wasn't even in hospice yet or anything. There was not like somebody telling us like, hey, this is about to happen. So, but and that is such a strong accusation that I only would have felt comfortable saying it out loud to somebody if something in me just knew beyond a doubt that was happening. It was just the weirdest thing. So I don't know. I don't know. How do you feel about this? If it's something that isn't so definite in your body, do you feel like it's just a thought? It's just anxiety? Maybe it is self-sabotage. Like, what do you think anything but that powerful feeling is for you?
I don't know. I feel like if it's not that I'm living in a freeze frame moment because this is such a big revelation for me.
Yeah.
A lot of times I think because I've had such intense gut feelings that if I don't have a particularly strong feeling about something, I just gonna have a suspicion. My first reaction is to shove it away as like, oh, that's just anxiety, or oh, I'm getting suspicious about nothing, or oh, I need more information before I really know how I feel. Right. But probably no, maybe they're tinier versions of gut feelings and I've just been ignoring them because they don't feel as wow as the others. But there are some times, actually only a few days ago, I just had this weird feeling. I was like, something's off. And I've had those in the past where I was like, I can't explain it, but someone around me is going through something. And then later that day, the house is on fire or something crazy. And so I've had little nuggets, but maybe it's because they don't personally affect me or I'm sensing something else. And I don't even know. I feel like I'm acting like I'm That's So Raven, like just some big psychic, but I don't. But there are I'm also backstory for other people. Not to get too woo-woo, but I have
get too woo-woo, please.
I'm a paranormal investigator. I've been a paranormal investigator since like 2012, so incredible. Over 10 years of doing it. And there's just, no matter how skeptical you are, there's just some things you just can't explain. And like, so,
yeah.
And I've had, weird experiences like that. But when it comes to a weird feeling, I'll usually listen to it, even if there's no, if it only affects me, I'll listen to it. If it affects somebody else, I'm like, oh, maybe it's just my anxiety going. But there are times where I feel really weird about like, oh, I have to be really careful today, and then I'll just cancel plans, or I won't get in my car because maybe I'm about to get in a car accident. And that sounds to me, that's where I always get tossed up, where I'm like, is that anxiety taking over and like ruining my day? And is that like a dysfunction I have to pay attention to, or am I like being cautious and staying on the safe side and like trusting my gut? Like, I don't know where the middle ground is when it's something that's not causing like an overwhelming panic in me.
Right. And that's the scariest part. It's like, I just wish it was either really strong or really weak. I hate that in the middle shit. That's what really messes me up. For me, it's the same thing for dreams. It's like when a dream feels a certain way, like, oh my God, I know this means something. I know this dream felt different than the other dreams, but if it's anything kind of in the middle, like maybe it could, or maybe it's fine. Maybe it's just my brain, I don't know, sifting through information. But yeah. So should we get into why we self-sabotage? Some
1000%
juiciness. So obviously we self-sabotage for a lot of different reasons and, subconsciously. And we've talked about it's just a way to protect yourself from potential rejection, failure, just the unknown. So common self-sabotaging behaviors and signs that you might be currently self-sabotaging. Number one, negative self-talk. Such a big one. And it's like, it's hard. You have to like catch it and then reframe it immediately, because what is that whole cycle of like, what you think, you believe, and what believe informs your actions, and then your actions reinforce what you think about yourself, and it just goes in a fucking circle constantly.
Yeah, it's like this just awful chain reaction.
Right. And it's like, so if you catch yourself like, I don't deserve to be here or whatever it might be, you have to really say, okay, I'm going to say something different to myself. I totally deserve to be here because I'm here or
Yeah,
else I wouldn't be here,
exactly.
stuff like that. Procrastination, we talked about putting off the important tasks and responsibilities until the last minute. And what else? Oh, making excuses, blaming outside factors for your lack of progress instead of taking responsibility, or just making excuses to avoid opportunities so you don't even have to risk failure or embarrassment or rejection. And both prevent you from making positive changes. Because if you feel like you don't have control over anything in your life, then you also believe that you don't have to control to change anything for the good,
also
right?
in some ways, by self-sabotaging, your brain is giving itself a way to still feel like it's in control when it's not. Because I feel like if you set yourself up to fail, then you can at least know that it's going to fail. Because then, which I mean, I feel like self-sabotage and self-fulfilling prophecy kind of get muddled in with each other, but
Yeah.
it feels a lot to me like if I ruin something early on, at least I had the control in ruining it instead of finding out that when I tried my best, it went bad. There's still some weird safety in the chaos because at least then I have something to blame it on later versus having to face like a vulnerability of like, oh, it didn't work out. And now I have to like realize something in myself. Ugh, like
Right.
no thanks.
No, thank
So
you.
it's so weird because I feel like
Yeah.
self-sabotage is it's like some sort of accidental misguided love for yourself or like some sort of it's self-protection in like a ass backwards way.
It is just so infuriating that our brain will want to keep us in something, even if it's a shitty situation,
Yeah.
only because we've been able to survive it. That's what's so tough. Is like, can we just upgrade our brains to stop doing that shit? To be like, look, just because you're familiar with this thing doesn't mean it's good for you.
Yeah.
So let's go
You
to
know,
this kind of unfamiliar point and try to do
well,
better.
so I feel like it is I feel like in a lot of ways self-sabotaging is like the root of, and I don't know if this is for everybody, but for me it feels like when I'm self-sabotaging it's trying to hold me back from like some underlying insecurity I have in myself where I'm like I guess like when it comes to starting new projects, like
Yeah.
I will procrastinate, I will find every reason not to do it, and I think at the end of the day I'll do that until I don't want to do the project anymore. And I've taken myself out of the interest. And at the end of the day, I think it's because I'm like, well, if I did start it and it didn't work out, it was going to be bad, or you weren't going to be good enough, or you were going to realize a bunch of speed bumps that were going to be exhausting in the end. So I'm protecting you from having to go through all that burden. Uh,
Mm,
but really, it's like, no, you're just telling me I'm not good enough. So I mean, I
right.
guess one of the questions I have for you is what parts, if you want to get really deep,
Yes.
what parts of
Yes.
you do you think are your roots for your own self-sabotaging tendencies? Like, where do you think that?
Ooh, I think a big one for me, that I resonate with on this list is a fear of success.
Mm,
Um, like I'm aware, uh, I think I'm aware of my fears of success enough that I don't let it dictate my decisions. And I've had to do a lot of work, um, like reflecting on my past decisions to like ask myself, did I do that for the right reason? Especially coming from the entertainment industry, right? Like that fear of success, I think is um, it's so apparent because you see these people rise and fall, right? Like in
yeah.
the entertainment industry, it's like okay, somebody gets very popular. It's only a matter of time before everybody tears them down. And then
Hmm.
and then it's on to the next one. Right. And so I think you become really aware of that, in that industry, especially to where I think maybe I've taken a little bit of that fear of success into my other endeavors, even outside of the entertainment industry, where I'm like,
Interesting.
I don't want to get too high because I don't want to fall too far. Right. Like
Yeah.
if I never get so high, then my fall is not that bad, right? It's like the difference between falling off a skyscraper and I don't know, a fucking bicycle, right? I'll take the bike, bitch.
Totally get
Okay.
it.
I'll take the bike. And so for me, it feels like I want to stay grounded. And maybe that has kept me a little bit in the middle of not getting too high, if that makes sense.
I do the exact same thing. There are so many times where I have an idea where I'm like, this would be incredible. This would be such a good thing. No one's ever done anything like it before, which like, it's probably not that great. But in my head, I'm like, I'm trying to like, I guess, I think I already know my tendencies of being afraid to like take the big step. And so I'm already trying to embolden myself and encourage myself. And this is going to be the best thing you've ever done. And then I work myself up with like how much work it'll take. And what if halfway through I'm not interested anymore? And then I spent all this money and time. And what if I involved people in the project? What if I hired like somebody to help me and now I have to pay them even though the project isn't going to go through anymore? And it's I get all these what ifs caught up in my head. Whereas some people, I don't know how they do it, but they just rip it off like a band-aid. They're like, well, let's find out. And I'm like, that's not something that's comfortable for me. I think it's rooted in there's got to be something. I mean, I between my own ADHD flaws and my own childhood trauma of like just I grew up in a very volatile uh emotionally unstable family. I was just raised by a narcissist and so there's a lot of things where I think I was constantly put down or told that either my voice doesn't matter or if it does matter, it doesn't matter as much as the really loud, angry person in the room. And so I think I'm just used to kind of having the self-doubt or the if it's not worth proving myself, then don't do it at all. And so that constantly comes up in my head now when I get excited about something. And I think I still have like some sort of inner child that's just scared of being seen unless it's going to work out really well or else someone in the room's going to be mad at me,
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
Not to get so dark and deep.
No, thank you for sharing that because it's really true, right? Like some people seem to have this kind of effortless ability to navigate life neutrally, right? Like if something great happens, cool. If something not so great, no big deal. That's life, right? But if you saw patterns of self-sabotage or self-doubt or fear or mistreatment, whatever that might be, it's like that wasn't a learned behavior. It was everything was very intense or severe or fearful. Even good things became bad things, or were turned into negative things. And so it's really hard to try to separate your feelings and beliefs about your situation and beliefs about yourself with other people's feelings about their situation, beliefs about themselves, and beliefs about you. Sometimes it's just too intermingled, where I will often find myself, if I'm going down some kind of spiral or I'm really beating myself up for a mistake or a misstep or just being imperfect, and like, this is not my shame. Like I'm absorbing it and I'm feeling it, but I don't act when I really get truthful about it. I don't actually feel ashamed about this. Where is this shame coming from? And it's not my voice, right? It's just something that I maybe witnessed. So that's what's so tough. It's like, gosh, you have to be so mindful because it really can feel like you when it's really not you. If you strip all the other stuff away, like you really got to, dig deep into your, like, I don't know, generational trauma and probably all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What's so hard about this, like, I think it's hard for me is like there is confirmation in a lot of my fears, a lot of the time, like everything does end, right? Like that's the truth. So when I'm fearful of like, okay, it's only a matter of time before you fall really hard, it's like that's kind of true in a way where it's like, okay, this thing will end at some point. And I don't know exactly how it will end, but I just have to hope that by the time it does, that I've done enough work on myself that it doesn't completely destroy and unravel me. Like maybe I've done enough work on my self-worth, or I'm not too intertwined. I haven't intertwined my worth with my accomplishments or whatever. I just hope that I feel whole when this does end.
Oof.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. When I started my podcast, it was before podcasting was a really big thing. I mean, there was a handful of really popular podcasts, I guess. We started ours back in 2016, 2017. Right?
Oh
We
yeah.
started it in 2016. It didn't air until 2017. And in 2016, there wasn't um anything really. I mean, podcasting was not what it is today, especially after COVID when everyone was home and got a microphone, and now it's like this big booming industry.
Right.
If I were to start podcasting today, or if I thought, oh, I want to start a podcast, no way would I do it because
Oh
the
wow.
stakes are too high now, where I feel like it's a very oversaturated market. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people listening and people actually know what a podcast is. When I first started a podcast, people asked me all the time, what the hell is that? Is that like ham radio? Like people didn't know what it was. And I think because
Yeah.
the stakes were so low back then, it was like, well, no one listens anyway. So worst case scenario, even if I fail, no one's there to see it happen.
Oh
Um,
my gosh. Yeah.
and nowadays, I mean, it was lightning in a bottle to start when I started. If I were to do it today, all the fears would come up of like, you're going to fail, everyone's watching you. It would have, there would be a very different outcome.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've
What do you
never
think?
asked myself that question when I think
Yeah,
about
I was going to say, what do you think self-sabotage has it ever been helpful to you? Like, I mean, or has it ever been like time specific, it worked out, and in another time you would have self-sabotaged?
it.
And maybe too specific of a
I
question, but
I think for me the biggest one, like if I look back and I have more awareness now, I think I definitely self-sabotage romantic relationships.
oh, yeah.
Haven't we all? The most basic
Whoa.
thing I've said today. No, but like I think when it comes to my career, even though I've made tough decisions, I have felt confident in I know I'm doing this for the right reason of even though this is really fucking hard.
Mm,
Where I think in past relationships, I thought I was doing the thing for the right reason. Um, but looking back, I think I was scared of the unfamiliarity that was in front of me. I
mm,
was emotionally immature and I didn't realize it. So when somebody was um being honest with me and giving me their time and telling me how they felt about me, I felt like it was too much or they were coming on too strong
hmm.
when in reality I just wasn't used to that.
Yeah,
And so I think I shied away from a lot of genuine connections. And I'm not saying that any of them would have worked out and I'm happily married now and all is good, but I think I would have explored those more if I had been used to receiving a certain kind of emotional connection and attention and like connectedness like that. Um,
mm, hmm,
and what's also hard is there was a relationship that I ended because it felt like a gut instinct. They maybe wanted a little bit more time from me. And I was so in love with stand up at the time that I like, that's all I wanted to do. And so it felt like my gut instinct was to let that person go so I could do more of this job. And it did propel me forward. So that's what's hard is like, I think it
right,
was both. I think it was self sabotage and gut instinct at the same time of like, I got to pursue this thing, but I don't think it had to be all or nothing. And I
right.
think I made an all or nothing situation and I could have found a little bit more balance. But um, I think those are the big ones for me is now that I'm more aware, I realize like, oh, I think that was a little bit of a self-sabotage.
Yeah, that's
Didn't
interesting though
evaluate
that
that.
that self-sabotage. I'm not saying, oh, we should all be like really into our self-sabotage and like love acting on bad behavior.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that in times it can propel you in the right direction by,
Yeah.
it's very nuanced. Let me just say that before people are like, oh, well, I'm doing it like this because one day it's gonna really work out. But but there are times where, you know, it has it's one of those things where I think you can't really say that until hindsight happens and it's like, oh, well, at least it worked out this way.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. I that makes me think of like when you let's say that you have a gut feeling about something but you never
Hmm.
act on it, you never get the answer or the satisfaction of knowing it was your gut instinct kicking in, right? Let's say that somebody's in unhealthy unhappy relationship or something and there's this this twinge there that like I
Hmm.
feel like this isn't right or something, but if they never leave it to either experience peace or freedom on their own or with somebody else, they can't look back and say, oh, that's what that was the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, I realized it was my gut instinct trying to get a hold of me to kind of move on. If you stay in it, you actually never have your answer either way. Whether it was
Right.
gut instinct or self-sabotage, you're just kind of like, eh.
Oh God. Wow. That's
Right.
definitely, if I were taking an edible or something right now, I'd be, that would be the thing that I just sit on the couch all day thinking about now. I feel like, one of my biggest things, which I want to ask you too, um, what your biggest way of self-sabotaging these days is.
Oh,
Mine
you
for
go
me
first.
is okay. So mine beyond projects and a fear of failure. Um, my two biggest ones that have always been with me, because just like with my childhood, it was just a very unstable, rocky home I grew up in, at least in the first few years. And I never really knew what healthy love looked like. I never knew what healthy connections were supposed to look like. I never knew what healthy conflict resolution looked like. I never knew what healthy emotional regulation looked like, or what what's an actual fight and what's not an actual fight. And if there is an actual fight, I never even learned how to fucking stand up for myself, because I was always the little kid in the corner when there was like the Hulk in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not going to ever learn how to have a charming back and forth with someone like that, where
Right.
you learn how to solve things in a healthy way. And so to this day, I struggle with um just conflict in general. I'm very avoidant, and it ends up self-sabotaging in certain ways. A lot of ways are I've outgrown a lot of friends. I've never had an official breakup with any of them, or even
Mm.
friends I want to keep around. If I ever have an issue with them, I'm too scared to stand up for myself, even in a safe space with somebody I trust and somebody I don't want to lose, who doesn't want to lose me. To
Yeah.
bring up the conversation at all is just too hard, because all I know is people get defensive, and you just never know what someone's habits are.
Right.
Um, and on top of that, I'm so used to messy relationships that I grew up seeing messy relationships. I've lived a few messy relationships, and because of that, now that I'm in a healthy relationship with an actual loving partner,
Yeah.
I like don't know what to do all the time, and like it's so uncomfortable. And I think I'm not used to being safe in a relationship, and it's so weird. Luckily, I found someone who's got you know, the ultimate patience, because I throw a lot of shit at her. I'm constantly trying to find issues in the relationship where
Mm.
um and not issues where like, the relationship's over, but I'm just constantly nitpicking. I'm constantly, blah 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 blah. And she's very good at calling me out. She's very patient, she's very kind, but I notice that um my first instinct is to try to find a problem so I can cause a problem, because I'm so used to the emotional roller coaster of the ups and downs that,
Yeah.
because we're plateaued, it feels like on a wavelength, because there's no emotional ups, there's no emotional downs. And that's what I think love looks like. If we're plateaued because we're safe and fine and happy,
Right.
that's uncomfortable for me. That's not normal. That's not what love looks like. I need to cause a problem so that way this feels like what love's supposed to feel like according to my childhood.
Right. So
So
like you were just like kind of always used to waiting for the other shoe to drop during a calm
yes,
time. It was always the calm
yes,
before the storm. So let me create the storm because I know it's coming and that's too much fearful uncertainty, anxiety. I'm going to create it.
exactly.
And then I
Well,
know
if
what that is, right?
exactly, if it's too silent and everyone's happy, I think I just grew up, and not only grew up, but then dated a few people where, oh, if everything's fine, that means like T minus 5 hours before we're screaming. So like, let me just beat
Mhm.
you to the punch. Like, just let
Let's
me at
get
least get
over
there
it
now.
now.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm in a relationship now where like we just don't fight, and that should be so lovely. But in my brain, I'm like, well, that's obviously wrong. That can't be right. Like, I'm just waiting for this big horrible thing to happen, which
Yeah.
is self-sabotage in its own way, because I have a really hard time automatically just embracing the good and automatically being grateful for what I have, because my first thought is, well, the other day I said I wanted a cup of water and she didn't just immediately get up and go, "Oh my God, you're so thirsty. I have to get you a cup of water." Like, I'll just like make up a fucking
Right.
problem.
Right.
Um anyway, so those are the two big things I deal with now is conflict resolution and creating problems where there aren't because I'm used to the instability. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and with that, I ask, where do you notice like most of your self-sabotaging coming from these days?
Oh, it is all perfectionism. I feel like that is
All of
like
it?
that. I would say that is, I definitely have conflict resolution issues. I think I'm better now than I was a few years ago, but I definitely
Sure.
was avoidant. Like for me, conflict equaled the end of a relationship. So if I didn't want a relationship to end,
Oh,
I did.
conflict, it meant the beginning of a relationship for me.
So interesting. So interesting. So if I like, even if it wouldn't be a bad conflict of any kind, even if it's just like important discussion, I should bring this up. I just wouldn't bring it up because for me, any kind of things that I witnessed was if there's a conflict, there's usually not a resolution. And then that kind of
Mm,
turns into those people go separate ways. And
right.
so if I wasn't ready to lose the person, I didn't want to bring it up. And so I just
I
didn't.
understand. I understand.
So I just
I
didn't bring it up. And so I would like wait for an opportunity to present itself and then organically mention it, but it was never like, I got to talk to you about something, you know? So
I
yeah,
do the exact same
conflict.
thing. So,
Yeah. Conflict resolution, really challenging for me. And then it's interesting because one of the things on this list of self-sabotaging behaviors is sabotage in your relationships, picking fights, being
mhm.
passive aggressive, or withdrawing from people who care about you, like yeah, finding problems that aren't real, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. For me, my perfectionism is so when I think about all the blocks I have, that is probably the one that just keeps coming up. Is
Mm,
that's the thing that keeps me stuck in inaction when something is like a simple task. I become aware that I'm avoiding it because I'm worried it's not going to end up good enough, or I'm putting too much pressure on myself to do it perfectly, or do it in a certain way that's in my head that's not realistic. And sometimes I don't even know what it is. But that one is just, it's so bad. And I think for me, there didn't feel like a whole lot of room for being imperfect because um if I like mistakes and missteps weren't treated so neutral.
mm,
Right. So it's like, you know, maybe somebody else feels like, all right, I messed that up. Let me just try again. They don't have this a lot of like emotion wrapped up into it,
mhm.
but a misstep or a mistake kind of wasn't a great thing.
Yeah.
Whether you know somebody around you felt bad about their mistakes or missteps, or somebody made you feel bad about a mistake, or um it's brought up a lot, like it's, you know, a simple, you know, misstep is consistently brought up over and over again through the years. Like you don't feel like
Mm.
it's a neutral thing. You feel like
Well, to just
no.
to never see like any piece from an accident or a mistake and to be
Yeah.
constantly picked on or poked at. It's just like, oh my God, like I'd rather just fucking nail it so nobody talks to me ever again about this.
Yeah, so it's like it's weird. It's like my relationship with mistakes and criticism feels a lot scarier than other people. You know,
Interesting. I
it's
just
like
live in just like a bucket of mistakes. And I'm just like, at least here everything's wrong. And then I can't do wrong because that just is normal then, you know?
where it's like, yeah, I'm like, everybody makes mistakes and like you logically know that, but if you feel like, I don't know, yeah, if you were made to feel bad about being human and being imperfect, or
Mm,
it wasn't good enough, then you feel like if you make a mistake, then something will be taken away from you. Love will be taken away, affection will be taken away, your worth.
I think
Yeah.
you accidentally just said something very I mean, this is not new information. We've been talking about self-sabotage this entire time, but it hit me it did something for me in my head where you described it as uh being criticized or persecuted for being human.
Mm.
And that I mean that's all self-sabotage is being afraid to be human and being
Right.
afraid to succeed or being afraid to try something new or being afraid to have a conflict or being afraid to find love. I mean, it's just being afraid to be human. It's some part of you that just got ripped away early that you're afraid to try again.
Right.
And Um, was there a moment for you where you realized that your perfectionism was self-sabotaging?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, I don't think there was a certain moment. I think it's just been a over
Over
time
time.
getting to know myself better about like where does this come from? Because I thought that's how everybody operated. Isn't it weird? Like you grow up
You're
and
gonna
then
have a
you
heart
like
attack by 40. Wait.
you just like meet people and they don't do that, and you're like, wait, what the fuck? Is this weird that I do this? Or um yeah, I don't know. I really don't know um how to improve upon it either. I try my best, and it's like it's tough when you're aware of something. Doesn't mean that it instantly goes away. It's like,
Do
not
you
you're just aware of it and now you're uncomfortable about that.
Is there ever a time where you have, let's say you have a gut feeling that something's going to go really well. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, as the perfectionism, and you just stop because you know you don't have to try that hard because it's going to go well? Or does that embolden you
Oh.
to be super perfect and you
Oh
know you can get away with it because it's going to work out?
my gosh, that's such a good question. I think my perfectionism kicks in when I really want something. Whether I think it's going to do well or not, I don't even think
Mm.
that's part of it. I think it's just like, wouldn't it be cool if I could pull this off, and let me put a million tons of pressure on myself to see if I can do it. If it's something that I'm like, yeah, I don't even know if it's about the outcome that I think will happen. I think it's just about the outcome that I would like to happen.
Mm.
And
But does would a gut feeling justify your over perfectionism if you wanted to do a project and you're like, well, I have to do it now because I know it's going to work out, so it better be great? Or does it take away some of the anxiety of like, well, no matter how well I do, it's gonna rock, so who cares?
I feel like my perfectionism has served me very well in some parts of my life. I will say like um whether it's a positive or negative part part of me, I do feel like it makes me very thorough.
Mm,
And I but it makes me thorough, but like and maybe turn in some good work, but at what cost? A lot of the times,
right.
cost to my health, um, cost to like how I'm
Your
spending my
sleep, your
time.
quality
Yeah,
of life. Yeah.
exactly. Where it's like I remember, oh my god, I wrote a senior honors thesis in college, and I turned it. It was supposed to be a rough draft, right? But my brain doesn't. I don't know how to do a rough draft really. I can do
Oh,
like
me
a,
neither.
a first draft that's basically done, just needs a few notes and then you
Yes,
write. But and
same
that's
here.
not, and I'm not saying that in a good way. I'm saying like it's probably not normal, right? It's not
Oh
good.
no, it's not.
Right.
Apparently, there are people who actually do rough drafts. I've never.
Which sounds
I
so liberating.
it feels like me and my procrastinating world. I'm like, what a waste of time. Like, just put the first thing in. If
But like, how great would it be to be like, here's just my basic notes, and I know that I can improve over time. I can add to it. I have all this time. I had 9 months to write this paper, but my first draft, my rough, it was supposed to be a rough draft. I wrote it in a month, and I turned it into my professor, and she was just in shock. Um,
oh,
and she just said, this is the most cogent thesis I've seen, like first draft I've ever seen, and I only have a few notes. Like maybe I don't know if she was excited for me, but also maybe a little concerned. Like
or
why
maybe that
did
you just plagiarize the shit out of it from somebody else.
it's like why did you do this to yourself in a way?
Yeah.
Because and then I made I made the notes, and then I was done, and I just had the rest of these months to not worry about it. But
Oh, what a
I made
life.
myself sick. I mean, I was so ill because I
Mm.
just did all the work up front when I could have just done it over time and had a
Maybe we
better balance in my life,
I
you
feel like
know?
we really are just perfectly meshed for each other because
Yeah.
I had a similar experience from the exact opposite behavior, which is that I waited my senior thesis. It was like 30 pages, waited till the very last minute, did it the weekend before. And, but the way that I saw it was like, look at all this time I have for months and months and months before I have to worry about this paper. And then once I have to turn it
Yes.
in, there's nothing that, even if they were to give me notes, which is self-sabotaging of,
Right.
even if they were to give me notes, it's too late. I've already given it to you. Like if I messed up, then, at least I can accept the C or the B or whatever the grade was because I did it late, so there's no time to do new notes, and I can just move on and quickly escape this and never have to deal with it again. So it's escapism in some way.
Interesting. Yes.
Um,
I have a question. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just gonna keep rambling. Go for it.
No, I have a question for you. How are you with setting boundaries? And do you ever feel like maybe lack of boundaries in certain areas has been self-sabotage for you?
Any boundary I've ever set, which is 0 of them. I I think if I were to set a boundary, it'd be the first time ever. I feel like I can make deals with myself very well when it comes to boundaries because then nobody's holding me accountable. But when it comes to other people, I'm so nervous to set a boundary. It feels like it's part of like the conflict resolution problems I have where to give any notes means that there's criticism. And I know any notes for me, I will take one very small note and read it as criticism and cry and avoid your text. And I have to really sit with myself before I can own something because I'll just read so deep into it. And I'm sure there's something there where I'm like, I think I'm going to be in trouble or I'm unlovable in some way. That's got to be a part of it, I bet. And so I'm always terrified to give that feeling to somebody else. I never want somebody to feel like they can't be safe around me. And I have, in a way, self-sabotaged by making myself appear as incredibly safe to people and warm and approachable. And I put myself in this corner where now I'm scared to shatter the illusion for you and just give my own opinion on something because maybe if it's too harsh, then maybe you won't feel safe with me. And if you don't feel safe with me, then I'll feel like I'm just the next generation of really mean people in my family. And like, I'm just so scared of making people feel like they can't come to me, or after criticism, they won't ever come to me and they'll see me as a monster. I'm rambling. No, I don't know what self boundaries are. Or I don't know what boundaries
makes sense. This totally makes sense. I mean, for me, sometimes setting a boundary was there was like punishment for that. You know, it wasn't taken as a good thing. And so then you kind of learn like, okay, I guess either I just shouldn't do that, right? I shouldn't set a boundary, or I should just be kind of quiet about it. Maybe I'll just passively set one, you know, and somebody will get the hint or something. And, but yeah, if you've been made to feel like a bad person for expressing your needs, or, you know, then it makes sense that you feel like if you're about to express your needs to, you know, somebody else, or vice versa, you know, you're going to have those like same feelings around it, even if that's not how the other person feels. Like I had an experience once where I really needed to share something with somebody, but I was so scared to, because I didn't want them to be mad at me. I didn't want our relationship to end, even though it really wouldn't. Like I knew logically it wouldn't, but because of the conflicts that I did see, I just didn't see a good way for it to end, you know, like if somebody was made to feel wrong for bringing up what they needed, I just didn't know how it would go. And so I brought it up and they were like, oh yeah, no problem. And then anyway, we moved on to something else. And I was like,
isn't that the worst?
All this buildup in my head of like, oh my God, if I say this thing again, they're going to take it as criticism. Maybe they'll take it as I don't love them anymore. They didn't take that shit at all. Obviously they had a totally different relationship with it. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. And not even mad, not even uncomfortable with it. I'm like, oh my God, how many times have I done this to myself when I'm projecting my own feelings onto somebody else?
Which is its own self-sabotage, because now you've wasted the emotional burden of your entire day. You've wasted your battery. You've wasted your time. You've wasted just so much time just thinking and just letting it sit in your head when you could have spent so many other ways on that day. You could have done so many other things that day.
Exactly.
I feel like as I'm trying very hard to be better about setting boundaries. I'm trying very hard to at least set them with myself or set them with other people. If I do set them though, like it's mainly like if I set a boundary with, I don't know, there's probably only like 2 or 3 people in my life I have to do that with, but it feels so stupid. And so I if you're not trying to set a boundary with somebody else who's also doing like a lot of inner child work, it feels really stupid. But it's helpful to me when I honestly like gentle parent myself or gentle parent the
Yeah.
situation. And I'm like, this thing made me feel really yucky. And what I think instead is I think maybe I like talking to me and the other person like we're kids, which feels so infantilizing, but I feel like I'm almost speaking on behalf of my like I'm the proxy for my inner child. And I'm like,
Right. Right.
it's not that this 5-year-old is hurt by this thing that you like. I feel like I'm
Right.
talking for a 5-year-old who's not in the room. And it
Right.
feels really silly and it probably makes me actually look like my argument isn't all that worth listening to. But the only way I know how to stand up for myself currently is baby steps. And that's sometimes literally defending a baby that, that never grew up somewhere in my head.
Yeah.
And uh, it feels really weird, but it has been helpful, especially, in times with my own partner. Um, we haven't had like any really serious conflict, but I've done the thing that you did where like it's a big deal for me and for her it's nothing, but to
Yeah.
stand up for myself at all is so new after 30 years of kind of thinking that's not my place.
Right.
That when I do say something, it comes with a lot of unnecessary tears because I like don't know how to stand up for myself. And I'm almost baby talking, like not in the like goo goo gaga way, but I feel like I'm using a lot of really downplayed words and I'm using very simple sentence structure just to get it out because if I think too hard, it just won't come out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
is there like anything what do you do when you're trying to set a
Well,
boundary?
have you ever been in a position where I've been in a position where I tried to set one and then it did make the other person feel bad because they felt
Oh shit.
like they were not being a good partner in whatever that situation was. And so
Mm,
then I just dropped my needs and my ideas for how to move forward. And
been
I
there.
prioritized their feelings of feeling sad. So then I was consoling them for feeling sad about what I had said. And then I leave the conversation like, oh my God, we didn't resolve the original problem of what the conversation was, which was the
Right.
fact that this was feeling like not great and we were both aware of it, but then they felt sad. So then I people please and
Uh-huh.
and I
Yeah.
prioritize their feelings because I don't people please at all costs to avoid any conflict. And
Me
then I
too.
realized, oh my God, we didn't figure anything out. So I'm in the same place. And I didn't even
So
realize I did that.
So what do you do in situations like that now? Because I still will do that where like
Yes.
I'll give up my own issue to, resolve someone else's stuff and then I'm just still
Yes.
left feeling like crap.
I have to literally bring bullet points and a little like post-it note to the conversation so I don't forget because I
Ooh.
can't rely on myself not doing it. It's just too ingrained in me. So I have to have something visible in front of me like, hey, remember, this is the point of this conversation. And so that's the only way that I can do it because I will get wrapped up in emotions and then I don't do anything. So I literally have to have
Mm.
a little note.
Have you found that now? So Cam is, obviously I love Cam. I think he's the best. But in moments of conflict with him,
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
you noticed that your own self-sabotaging because you're with like the right partner or he balances you out in certain ways? Does your self-sabotaging go away at all with him, or does it feel like it's the same
Mm.
level of conflict that you would feel with somebody else? Because with Allison, sometimes
Yeah.
I feel like it's worse because she means so much more to me, and so the fear of losing her is heightened. So does
This
it
is
feel the same?
so interesting because I don't actually feel the same fear around addressing Cam with something that I do like somebody else. I don't know what that is, but I like that when I think about like that buildup that I did over this thing that I, shared with a friend or whatever, I don't have those kind of buildups or fear with Cam. Like I feel like I can walk up to him and talk to him and address something challenging. Is there always a resolution at that moment? Maybe not, but I never felt like nervous about bringing it up. And I don't know if that's just
Interesting.
because I feel more comfortable um because he is my partner and we've just seen all the sides to each other and like maybe I feel secure that he like isn't going anywhere if there's a
Hmm.
conflict. um But yeah, I don't know. It hasn't been the same for me in my romantic relationship as other relationships. What about you?
Well, I'm not surprised that our answers are the exact opposite of each other, but because I do, I feel so safe with she's the first person I've ever dated where I just feel fully safe. I know she wouldn't leave if I had an issue,
Yeah.
but I still have to battle with myself to say anything because I have to remind myself to like break away from what I knew before Allison. Up until her, I've only been in unhealthy relationships. I've only been in abusive relationships. I've only been in relationships where I wasn't respected, or even honestly, just to put the onus back on me, I was also much more emotionally immature at the time too, where that doesn't excuse some of the things that I had to go through, but I can at least see the like even if I wanted to resolve conflict in those relationships, I wouldn't have done it the right way. And
Mm,
so I feel like almost like a baby deer learning how to walk all of a sudden because this
yeah.
is the first time I'm in a safe space and I don't know how to navigate that. And I think that because it's unfamiliar, which is the whole point of self-sabotage is to keep you from the unfamiliar. Um, I feel like even though this should be the easiest relationship I'm in, it feels like the hardest in some ways because all of a sudden I've got something I don't want to lose and I don't know how to operate. So
Mm,
the anxiety mounts more, which means I have to fight it more often in my head. When I was in toxic relationships, I never had to self-sabotage. But being in the relationship was the self-sabotage. I already knew what was going to happen everywhere else. And so
interesting.
with Allison, it's always this game of mental gymnastics in my head of, oh, well, what's going to happen today? And then I have to remind myself that nothing's going to happen today. Just love and kindness and compassion for each other. And you're heard and you're valid. I catch myself doing a lot more affirmations in a healthy relationship because I have to remind myself to chill the fuck out before I cause a problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Interesting.
opposite of you.
Well, you know what's interesting? I think, and I'm curious to know if you would feel like, let's say that like you owned a home together, or you something that was harder to leave each other,
Yeah,
right? Where
yeah.
it's like I felt like, I really wanted to get married because for a variety of reasons, but a lot for myself because in my past relationships that it was kind of easy for me to leave. And
Mhm.
I didn't want that with Cam. I really wanted to like stick it out. And so I knew that, I don't know, that extra step for me, I think made me feel a little bit more secure, even though it's a piece of paper. I mean, it's like takes a phone call and a couple meetings to dissolve it, right? Like it's
Mhm.
really, but for me, it felt like, okay, maybe a little bit, it felt different than past relationships. I hadn't been married to my other boyfriends, and those relationships, if something was feeling off, like I could talk myself out of leaving. And I like
Again,
was nervous I was
we're
going to do that with
we're
him.
the exact opposite again. Because I there's nothing that I want to do less than get married.
Yeah. Yes,
Because
tell me more.
well for I mean I have my own like, there's like, that it's archaic and I'm just a little too in my feminist head for it.
Yes, and
Um
not everybody has the privilege to do it. Like that's it. That
sure,
it's
sure.
not lost on me either. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of reasons that are, you could look up why people don't like marriage and I'm probably for all of those.
Yeah.
But emotionally, personally, relationally, there it's I think because I've seen so many failed marriages around me, that I have definitely become a cynic. I'm definitely like, if half of the marriages end in divorce, and that's just the half that actually decide to get divorced, there's probably another 20% of people who are miserable. Then there's
Mm.
only, how many people that are actually happily married left. And so then it just feels like marriage is like a negligent thing to do because it sounds like if you ever told somebody like, oh, there's a 70% chance you're like it's gonna fail. I was like, well, that's a terrible. Oh, why would I take those chances? So anyway,
Yeah.
I have definitely
Yeah.
become a cynic. I definitely like sound like a moody teenager when I
No,
talk
this
about it. And
totally makes sense. And I agree with you for a lot of these things. I really do. Yeah. Yeah.
I always feel bad, especially when I'm talking to a married person. Like, you do whatever you want. I'm just telling you, I'm just like too cynical for it. But But I do believe in a long-term commitment. I've been with Allison for 7 years. We're very happy together.
Yeah.
She is the only person I want to be with for the rest of my life. And so far it looks like that's going to be the way things go. No notes, just perfect. But the idea of, I think I've just seen too many messy relationships and too many wrong people being married to each other, and it just isn't appealing to me. It just feels like, if I already told Allison this is like so horrible, but luckily I'm with somebody who gets it, which I'm very lucky for. Anybody else would be like, we're immediately breaking up. But I did tell Allison, pretty much right away, like I'm really not into marriage. If we are gonna ever get married, I'm not going to like, I am so pro divorce. Like I am leaving if it's not working anymore. Like
totally.
At which point for me, I was like, then I don't see the point of divorce, because or I don't see the whole point of getting married, because if it's supposed to be like this big lifelong commitment, I will never, ever, ever just commit blindly to someone I've known for 7 years and I've got another 80 to go. That's not how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And she was very understanding. It's everything has worked out very well. All signs point to just green flags.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to, like how you said with Cam, it felt like something you hadn't done with anybody else. You wanted to like make something of it. For me, it just feels like, I think I'm constantly waiting for there to be conflict, and I don't want to maybe get married and then find out the conflict and then I'm trapped in some way, even though you're not really trapped. But
you're saying, yeah,
I don't know. There's something in it that just makes me really uneasy, and I'm sure it stems from all that other stuff first, and then secondarily, it's like, well, I don't really see the point of it. If at some point, what if we don't like each other? I've never known anybody who I've liked my whole life, so what are the odds it's you, like, I love you very much today, but like, what if when we're 70, like you have a whole personality shift? I don't know if I want to, I don't know. It all freaks me out. It's just
totally makes sense. And here's
constant anxiety.
What's interesting is I never wanted to get married. I didn't think I would get married. I didn't know if I believed in it, especially with my relationships before Cam. I was like, I don't really get this, because do you just kind of pick somebody and hope for the best and you're not really feeling it? Like, because I hadn't felt the way I feel about Cam, I never felt about anybody else. So I really was trying to think, like, are people just picking somebody and like forcing this? You know what I mean?
Especially so many people pick them like at 25. I'm like, my brain wasn't fully developed at 25. What are you talking about?
Yes. And, we've talked about, like, yes, I'm also avoidant of conflict. I was definitely in a pattern of like, I don't know, I'm not really feeling this anymore. And maybe not even aware why. I knew, like, I at some point knew, like, okay, I do want a long-term relationship, and what I've been doing isn't working great. And I think it was like a year or two into dating Cam, I was like, I think I could get married. I think I see that for myself, because I think it will keep me in it differently. Not in an unhealthy way. Like, if things go really awry and it's not good, we will leave each other for sure. We've both said, like, we do not want to be in an unhappy situation just because of a piece of paper. No, thank you.
Right.
But I am glad, because I was right about the fact that it did force me to confront my shit instead of running away. And I'm glad, because every time we've confronted something, our relationship has improved. So I am glad that it has provided this like container in a way that wasn't there in my other relationships. But it's not to the point where, oh my God, if I'm miserable for like 2 years, I'd be like, I gotta stay, definitely not. But it tricked my brain a little bit.
Interesting. I feel like with my one of my problems, because I'm so conflict avoidant, is that I usually don't leave a relationship until it's way past its prime. Like years ago, we should have broken up. And so I don't think I ever needed like that extra accountability to stay. I already stay too long. So I feel like we really are just like so not meant for each other. But
funny, we're so similar in so many ways, and then polar opposites in other ways. It's like 50-50.
But like the idea of being with Allison, like, I mean, first of all, if I was able to stay in those horrid relationships for far too long. I know I'm staying with Allison for as long as I can. Like there's no,
Yeah.
but like even if we had a problem, even if we had a big problem and people were saying you need to go, knowing who I am, I probably wouldn't until I self-sabotaged all the way into a dead end. And there was nothing left. I think my mentality in relationships before was, well, stay until you can say you've tried everything, which at the time felt like wise, but now I'm realizing like, oh my God, that's like so encouraging of like staying in abuse and staying in toxicity and staying in like an unhealthy situation. It's like if you know it's wrong, just go. Like what why test every experiment first?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I think that was my like MO was like, oh, I'm gonna stay with you and I'm gonna try every single way to make this work so that way when I do leave, I there's no what ifs.
That's so
And
interesting. Okay, yeah.
that was very intoxicating at the time of like, well, I can leave and have no regrets. And if I'm gonna be heartbroken, at least I can't, stick around in bed and say, if only I did this. Because I did try that 3 years ago when it was already not working.
Right.
Um, and so because of that in my new any relationship, I know that I will stick it out far too long because that seems to be my pattern. Um, yeah. Anyway.
This is so interesting because I totally agree and understand like that can keep you somewhere too long where it's not good for you. I think in other ways that served me very well. Of course, polar opposite.
Well, that goes back to my
Where
question earlier of like, is self-sabotaging sometimes good or
right,
like, is there something safe to it?
where for me, I have to exhaust all options before I move on to something,
Mhm.
on from something, or else the rumination is too bad for
Yeah.
me. That I know that about myself. Like I have to truly try everything, but I do it quickly. I don't, I'm like, look,
Mm.
I'm like, when I think about this is kind of more trivial now, but than what we've been talking about, like closing a business down. I have to think about, okay, I'm going to try this in a variety of ways before I make this decision. I'm going to try
Hmm.
stepping away from it completely and having somebody else run it for a while. I'm going to try taking a 2 weeks off and see how I feel about it. Like I try all these like little mini experiments and then I'm like, okay, I felt the same in every scenario. I'm ready to move on. Goodbye. Right. But it's like, it's like I'm aware that I have to exhaust those things before leaving, or else I'd be like, oh shit, I didn't try that whole thing.
Yeah.
I didn't hire a social media manager. Maybe that would have been the thing that made a difference. And maybe I would have stuck around, like those little things. So
They eat at
um
you or they eat at
yeah,
me.
yeah.
So,
Isn't it interesting? How do you feel about this too when it comes to setting boundaries? That by not setting boundaries, you can get wrapped up in everybody else's stuff. And then
hmm.
you don't have to focus on your stuff as much. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I don't resonate with this a whole lot maybe anymore. But there's definitely been people in my life who are always busy with other people's things, like whether
Hmm.
it's getting wrapped up in their problems or coming to the rescue a lot or whatever, that they don't actually, I think it's avoiding their own stuff,
Yeah.
the own work that they have to do, things that would be good for them to do. But they don't. And the excuse is, well, so and so had this emergency and I had to go. Right. Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about, like, does that resonate with you at all? Of like having no boundaries or lacking boundaries in areas so you can avoid your own internal work or
I think you're calling me out for the first time in front of everybody because I don't think I realized that maybe that's what I was up to when I was younger. That totally makes sense. Um, thank you, Dr. Fisher. But
You're welcome. No problem.
I,
That'll be
yeah, what
$5,000. I'll bill you.
thank you. A super bill, please. I feel like when I was younger, and this doesn't happen anymore because as I think I'm just becoming a bit of a curmudgeon old man, and I'm like, ugh, I don't even want to deal with it.
Yeah.
But a lot of my childhood, teenhood, collegehood, I was very into the drama, and not like not actually being part of the drama. I think I would throw in a nugget every now and then just to do a little shit stirring if things got low. But for the most part, I just liked hearing the drama and like being in on the stories and like what's going on
Yeah.
and oh, who's mad at who. And a lot of times I would have glommed onto one person specifically because either my best friend was involved in it or somebody I had a crush on was in on it. And then I would be able to people please them through their drama while I got to like hear the juiciness of what was going on. And I was kind of detached from it. And now that
Yeah.
I'm hearing what you just said, maybe that was my own way of like kind of escaping my own chaos by focusing on someone else's chaos. And
Right. Right.
like, oh, well, I can't focus on my stuff because I got to focus on their stuff. But really, that's like the beginning of that's the number one reason you should have a boundary is like, no one asked you to do that. Like, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're stressing yourself out. You're going above and beyond for somebody who's probably not going above and beyond for you because they're also so busy about their own shit.
Yeah.
Um, man, you kind of just blew my mind. Yeah. So apparently that was what I was up
Yeah,
to.
I definitely
And
did that when I was younger too.
which makes me wonder, maybe it's just an age thing, but I mean, maybe you might have some insight on this too, is I wonder if it's age that has taken me away from doing that stuff, or, in the last 5, 6 years, I've been doing a lot of inner work, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
that the lore for that isn't as intense as it used to be. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think if you were kind of trained, for lack of a better term, to be like a rescuer of other people, like
Mm,
if you were put in a role of like you take care of other people before yourself,
yeah,
then you're comfortable in that role and you do that as you get older, not realizing it's not great for you, but you just don't even know there's another option. Like, wait, I can take care of
yeah,
myself like
yeah,
first and then other people? That seems, especially if that was seen as bad or selfish, you don't want to try that, right? You don't want to be seen as a
exactly.
bad or selfish person. So for me, I think it's truly just been experience. Like I just, you hit your own walls with stuff like, okay, this is not working for me anymore. I got to do something different,
Yeah,
rescuing people and, dropping everything at the drop of a hat, or coming to their rescue at a drop of a hat. It's not good for me. I'm neglecting my own health, my own goals, and so I think you just kind of, for me, I just kind of hit my own thing. There's actually there was a time where, okay, I, in the same week of time, I had 4 different people ask if I could take them to the airport
oof,
within a week, right? And usually I wouldn't think anything of it if it was here or there, but it made me realize, oh my gosh, I'm the airport friend. Not that that's a bad
mm,
thing, but I'm like, I'm the person that people think will probably say yes, so they ask, right? There's probably a big list of people they didn't even think to ask because they know the person's going to say, sorry, I have work, or I'm
yeah.
not able to do that, or could you Uber or whatever. And so it hit me like a ton of bricks when it was like, oh God, as cheesy as it sounds, the universe trying to wake me the fuck up. Like,
Uh-huh.
this is 4 people. How many more people do you need for you to confront what you're doing? You are over people pleasing. You are really,
But was it ever intoxicating in the beginning? Like it was like an honor that like they thought of you and nobody else, or did right off the bat you were like,
I'm sure. I think it was a mix of stuff of like, I feel like I should do it because I can, and maybe I technically have the flexibility in my schedule, so I should, maybe an obligation.
mm,
Sometimes it's like, oh, I would love a little break and chat with a friend and
yeah,
take my lunch break, and that's cool. But I think when it was so obvious, like, okay, I'm the airport friend. How do I feel about this? Do I want to keep being the airport friend? Sometimes, maybe, but not by default. Because if I had said yes to everybody that week, that would have been a lot of time out of my week that I would have maybe not been exercising or eating lunch or getting my work done like that. And it showed me a bigger pattern that
oof,
I was doing of like, this is just the airport thing. Where am I doing this in all the other ways of
yeah,
why I feel so exhausted all the time and chaotic? And it wasn't anybody's fault, because I could have said, oh no, I'm not available to do that. But
yeah.
again, if you're afraid of disappointing people, you might say yes when you really should say no, or you really secretly want to say no.
Yeah, there. So I've told you this, but in our own in our own friendship, but I've been
Yeah.
going through something called the Renaissance, where I am getting rid of friends who don't serve me anymore, and I am
Yeah.
replacing them with people who do serve me.
Yeah.
And I like to say I'm going through it as if it's like some big woe in my life that I created, by the way. Um,
Do you have like a spreadsheet like people do fantasy football? You got your
like a bracket. It's like, oh, you didn't make the cut.
All right, Brenda. You didn't, yeah, no touchdown this week.
I did have a list on my phone as like a hit list in some way where I was like, they get one more try. And then I'd be like, ooh, 3 strikes, you're out. Sorry, not texting you for my birthday.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
But it all started because the first person to be taken off the list, we have known each other since I moved to Los Angeles. I moved here in like 2014. And I thought we were a lot closer than we were. And then I realized, oh, I'm the only one making the effort to meet up. It's always around their schedule. It's never them driving to me. I'm always driving to them. And then the only time they would ever text me is if it was to help them with something like, oh, hey, I'm moving out of my apartment. Can you help me? Can you help me move? Or
right.
And then at some point, to my face, even said, because I said something like, oh, I'm, thanks for thinking of me, because I was reading it as, oh, I'm clearly the first person in their mind because I'm so helpful and they love hanging out with me. To my face, they said, well, I knew you'd say yes. Nobody else would say yes. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, I think I just fell out of love with you.
Yeah.
So that was the first person off the list, and that was the beginning of the Renaissance. But I think in that way now too, where I'm like very much like, oh, I'm the airport friend. And the worst part is I do have people pleasing tendencies, but I also really just love helping people. I love being thought of. I love someone, I've asked you a million times if you were ever going to move. I'm like, oh, do you need help? And it's truly out of, I just want to spend time with you. And if it's doing something productive at the same time, great. I have a really hard taking care of myself with my own neurodivergence, but I am very good at helping other people. And it's just a way to show love and enjoyment in each other's space. And I realized that a lot of people were only seeing me if they could take me up on an offer to be helpful. And I was like, oof. Like I was like, am I not fun enough to like go get a fucking sandwich with though?
Right.
Like what's going on?
Oh, you are. You are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, no, that's got to be kind of heartbreaking to like somebody, I don't know, to be like so blatant about it too. Like, oh.
No, it was, I honestly, they always kind of scared me with how direct they were. And then it ended up working out because they very directly said, oh, well, I only hang out with you when I need you. And
better to know than not know in that situation, for sure.
So, but I feel like that I truly was just trying to be helpful, and not even in a way where it was to avoid some other issue or avoid some conflict. I just wanted to be helpful. And now I'm realizing that was just like a very slippery slope into self-sabotage of like, well, I know this one thing works. And so if I can apply it in bad situations, it will work there too. So it's interesting that like good things can accidentally trigger self-sabotage, or good behaviors or things you like about yourself can end up being weaponized in some way.
Right. Oh my gosh. There's a quote that absolutely changed my life, and I would credit the person if I remembered who it was, but basically that people pleasing is lying. And if you don't want to be a liar, stop people pleasing. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Interesting.
That changed everything for me, because if you are people pleasing and in the cases where, okay, I don't really want to do this, but I'm afraid to say anything, so I'm going to do it, right? You're building kind of resentment. You're also just not allowing for an authentic conversation or connection between the person. That person doesn't actually know you the way that they should. Like they should know your likes and dislikes and what you want to do versus not want to do. And so that really changed things for me to like the last several years. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want to be a liar. How can I change this around? I always thought like, oh, people pleasing was a good thing in the sense of like you're being helpful, you're being kind to other people, but there is that like darker side of it of like, I'm not being honest with how I feel. And you don't have the opportunity to I'm not telling you about it, so you don't have the opportunity to address it with me. And that's really unfair to the other person. Whether they respond well or not, you're not giving them the opportunity to have like an honest exchange with you. That blew my fucking mind and changed my my behavior around that stuff. And now I feel like I am a pretty honest even if
How
it's
would you
hard.
say that if I said, "Hey, can you come over and help me with this?" and you didn't want to do it? What's like the way
Yeah.
that you just know?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, if I really wanted to, like, yeah, tell me what time, right? If I'm like, oh, I have other stuff to do, but um,
Or good luck.
I do want to help. I might say like, oh, I have an hour. Is that good?
Uh-huh.
I might
Okay.
like maybe set a time on it, or I might just say, you know what, I'm so swamped. I'd love to help you, but I don't have the capacity. So it's like I have a few different go-tos,
Yeah. So
but I
now if
feel
you ever
like
say that, you just said it to me. I know exactly.
I've revealed all my secrets. But I feel like I'm a very different person around that now than I was like 4 years ago or whenever that,
Hmm.
that big click happened. But yeah, I think it's a lot easier to be honest now because there's enough evidence that people won't be mad at you or think you're a terrible person or leave you if you express your need.
Well,
Like,
what's interesting
right?
too is because I don't know how much of this is really a self-sabotage versus like, I feel like it's a kind of a combined thing. It's self-sabotage. It's also like being raised female in this society and having trying to bend and cater to others
Yeah.
and not take up space. But the preemptive people pleasing, like the texting someone with the millions of exclamation points and being like, "Hey, no worries if you can," and also tell me if I'm overstepping, and also if you can't, tell me about like
Right.
the really overly coddly way that a lot of us ask for help. And it could just be because we were always told not to ask for help, and so we don't know how to voice it, and we're trying to make it as approachable as possible.
Yes.
Um, or we've all had someone really like incredibly aggressive or abrasive in our way tell us that we needed to help and we just don't want to come off that way. But I
Right.
feel like in that way it's also self-sabotage because they're not really being, even if you're being honest, I feel like you're already spending so much additional time trying to create the safe space, assuming that you don't already come off as safe.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm being a hypocrite right now because I constantly am people pleasing. I do that. I text like that. I'm always afraid of not looking safe or approachable, and so I'm always thinking for twice as long about how I'm going to execute something before I do it. I'm totally being a hypocrite. But as we're talking about self-sabotage, it's interesting that there's a whole realm of people pleasing without the person even being involved yet. It's
Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh my
just
gosh.
being so scared of the outcome, you know?
You brought up such a great point of like there's so many layers to this. Like if you have been conditioned around your gender, if you have been whatever your upbringing was around childhood and family members or whatever. Let's say that you also have like a traumatic relationship or experience. It's like there's so much layers to this stuff that like Cam and I will talk about things because he's not a people pleaser at all. You know exactly what Cam is feeling and thinking at
You
any
know what
given
he's
moment.
about.
There is no filter with that dude, right?
I think the
And
last
so
time I went over to your house, we're like, "Oh, do you want to sit with us?" And he just went, "No." All right, great, okay.
I watch football or whatever it is. Yeah. And we've talked about that. He's like, because he doesn't get the people pleasing and stuff that I've had to work through. And I don't get his ability to just be really honest no matter what.
His
And we
male privilege of just being able to
exactly
own a room. Yeah,
Exactly. I
yeah.
said, well, let's take a look at this. You were not conditioned as a woman in our society. That's one. Our backgrounds are very different with how we were raised in that situation. I'm Cam's first relationship. I'm his first girlfriend that he ended up marrying. I've had several relationships. One was incredibly traumatic. I'm like, yeah. So you see like all these experiences and how they shape your behavior. And it's really funny when your partner is such a stark contrast to that and you can look at each other like, where did that come from? How do I get more of that?
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like, hey Cam, you can be a little more gentler with how you say things. And he's like, Delanie, you can be a little bit more honest and direct. And we're like, we've kind of balanced each other out in those ways.
Yeah.
Curious to know, another thing on this list of self-sabotaging behaviors is risk avoidance and staying in your
Oh,
comfort zone and not taking chances that could lead to other opportunities. Does that resonate with you, or do you feel like you take a fair amount of risks? Where are you at with that?
24/7 I am risk avoidant.
Really? Because isn't part of
Yeah.
ADHD taking risks or doing things impulsively as well?
Yeah, but the impulsivity only feeds my comfort. Where it's like I'm impulsively
Oh,
spending or I'm impulsively eating or I'm impulsively I'm oversleeping, or I'm doing whatever it takes to make myself feel cozy. And uh it's such a weird thing because it's like, oh, I'm giving myself stress to take away stress, which
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
um but no, when it comes to like interpersonal relationships or my career, I'm constantly terrified of a risk. I mean, there's so many things even with the podcast where my co-host and I have thought, oh, we should do this, or oh, we should do this, and let's try this project, and other people are doing it, so we know it would work. And it's still just like it's too many what ifs in the air that freak us out, or like what if it doesn't work? What if we're the ones who do it wrong? And not that both of us are risk avoidant, but I definitely have my own shame in my relationship with my co-host, because I feel like there's a lot of times where she's like, let's get the ball rolling, and then I just like freak out and just like it gets dropped. And so um there are a lot of times where the good does not outweigh the bad, even though I've completely made up the bad and the good hasn't even happened yet. And also it's a fake situation because I just decided it in the shower one day that it was all going to fail and burn.
Mm,
um it's wild how your brain will play such evil tricks on you, because for all I know, we missed out on like a great opportunity, or in my own
right.
life I've missed out on a great opportunity, or um it's just wild how afraid of the what ifs a person, me, can be.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
like I feel so mixed around this one because there's some risks that I'm very happy that I took, and then there's
really.
there's some risks that I'm wish I didn't take. So I feel like both. Like I'm so glad that I ended up leaving a corporate day job I hated to start my own business. It set me off on this trajectory of entrepreneurship and all of that stuff, and and trying not to settle for 5/7 of my life being shitty, and hating it, right? Like I'm glad for that type of risk. But there's also like a risk that I took where actually this was a big part of people pleasing. I made an investment a while back that just wasn't the right investment for me, and like
Mm,
my initial gut reaction was like, this isn't for me. But my people pleasing kicked in, and I didn't want the person to be disappointed in me
I know exactly what you're
or
talking about.
whatever, so I just said yes to it. And then
Yeah, and
it
then you felt
was
kind of dirty and weird and kind of
yes,
like,
and then I was
oh,
like, "Oh god, I wish I hadn't done that." There was probably an easier, more affordable way to learn that lesson, and I don't feel very good about it. And it some good things came out of it for me as like as far as being an entrepreneur and running businesses and stuff. I am very aware, like if you're in like a position of sales or something, the person on the other end has a lot of trauma responses to certain conversations where
hmm,
I never asked for like a sale for a service face to face. I always let them sit with it, and then you can get back to me like via email or something.
yeah,
Never had like hard sales situations. And I I realized like when I experienced that, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really glad that I never put somebody in this position, because I think a lot of people would have said yes to me for the wrong reasons
sure,
of
yeah,
not wanting to disappoint me or maybe being a fan of the podcast or whatever. But when they're able to sit with the decision, they can let that all come up. Does that make sense?
totally,
So
totally.
I got, because I at that time I was scared of conflict. I was scared of disappointing somebody, even somebody I didn't know. I didn't even know
Yeah.
this person, right? And so that was a really hard lesson to learn.
What are some
Yeah.
of the ones that you do regret, your risks?
And it's so hard because I think even from like an investment that wasn't right for you or a relationship that didn't work out, there's so much that you do learn from it. And even a decision that you wish you had the awareness to make differently, it did propel you somewhere. So I don't know. I feel like
Yeah,
I don't really have regret. I just hope somebody else can learn from that little misstep maybe that I've made, and maybe do it a little bit easier for themselves, because ultimately it got me to where I am today, which I'm happy with.
I know.
So
I know
yeah.
you said one of them was like the investment that you
Yes.
regretted doing.
Yeah.
Mine was always hiring friends,
Oh, that's a good one.
where halfway I really, and it's not because they don't have the skill. I I've only ever hired people that I knew could do their job. Like so well, so well.
Yeah.
And then it's like something happens at some point where there's a miscommunication, or all of a sudden I have to play boss to my friend, or all of a sudden um there was one time where we hired my friend. There was like apparently a miscommunication about the payment, and it ended up being like not what they were expecting. It turned into like a whole thing. Um, and in moments like that, I've never regretted anything more. I'm like, this is like the worst conversation to have with somebody that I respect and who respects me. And like, now what if we don't respect each other? Because like we're both being really awkward. And so that's always been a big one for me. What you said
Yeah.
something earlier that really uh resonated with me is that you said something about we were talking about risk. I'm not gonna I'm gonna butcher it, so I'm just gonna go straight into saying that I think it's really interesting that you almost associated risk with what I would consider a gut feeling, where
Mm.
it would because I'm very much not a risky person. I don't like to be involved in risk. I try to avoid it where I can.
Yes.
Um, but in the times where I have been risky, they have been from gut feelings. So like me moving to Los Angeles, that's pretty
Right.
risky. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have like anything. And I just went, but it was because I had a weird feeling that I should just be here. Or
Right.
the podcast where that was very risky, and it was like a weird gut feeling I had from that when I met Christine and I got not now. All of a sudden, the first time I hung out with her and I didn't get that feeling, I was like, oh, maybe we should take the leap into friendship. And immediately we started talking about podcasts. It just kind of happened. And so a lot of my risks have come from gut feelings because I think the rest of the time I'm constantly mid self-sabotage.
Yeah.
So uh I don't know, have you had any do you think a lot of risks that you've taken? I feel like that's almost like the weird middle of the Venn diagram between a gut feeling and self-sabotage, that they both involve risk. Um
Yes, totally. And when I look back, I'm like, oh, I had the gut feeling that, like, let's just take the investment thing for example. I had the gut feeling that it was a no, but I ignored it and I said
mhm.
yes anyway. Right. So was it really a risk? No, it was just me not listening to my gut. Right. It wasn't like this
Yeah.
exciting risk thing. It was like, I feel like I have an obligation to say yes for some reason. And it wasn't this person's fault at all. Um,
What is the risk when you were weighing the risks? What was your situation when with leaving stand up? Like was that
yes.
gut feeling,
Yeah.
self-sabotage? I mean, they both had risk in it. Either you
Yeah.
keep doing something that is like a very scary career, or you leave and have to start all over again.
That is such a good question. I think for me, and I've had to really get very honest with myself because the decision to leave stand up, even the decision to leave social media, right? It was like I look back and I'm like, God, I left when things were working well and going well. And like with stand up, it was just it was getting easier. I was getting more visibility. I was getting TV gigs and other gigs. There was nothing bad about it. Same thing with social media. Okay, my following is growing. And I had to ask myself, wait a minute, am I self sabotaging? Like anything that gets too good or too easy or too big,
Yeah.
am I cutting it off before it has a chance to grow? But then I look at like the podcast, I'm like, but I didn't leave the podcast. When the podcast started gaining traction, because I started to freak myself out, like, oh my God, have I just self sabotaged anything that's gained traction in my life and
Right.
cut it because I have that fear of failure? But I'm like, yeah, but I didn't leave the podcast. And so when I look at it, I'm like, wait, these all of these things had gained traction, but this kept me here. Why? Well, the podcast, I genuinely love it and enjoy it. I really love it. It also fits with my ideal lifestyle. I could do it from anywhere, any location, anytime. I can live anywhere with it, all that stuff. So it just for me, it feels creative, but it also feels meaningful in other ways. Like to me, it ticks all my boxes where stand up, something like stand up didn't tick all my boxes. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's creative, but like I got to travel a lot. Don't like traveling. Like all these things. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of things that I don't want to deal with. I don't want to be out nights and weekends. There's so many things, and so I realized that a big part of my decision making when I would want to move on from something, even if it's hard and objectively or externally looks like it's going well, is if I am not happy in the best case scenario, it's time to make a change. If I can see like, look, things are going well and I'm still feeling sad and empty, something's wrong. And this feeling probably won't get better, right? Like I can see the trajectory. Okay, so best case scenario, I'm booked all the time. I'm getting a lot of work. I'm getting opportunities. Okay, so I'm never home. I'm living, maybe more on the road. Maybe I'm making good money, but like I'm not happy. I started just looking ahead and I'm like, okay, best case scenario is not for me. So I would rather make the change now than stay with this longer and get too deep in it and get too dependent on it for different things. So I like to course correct early before I sense, you know what I mean? Like, let me fix this as soon as possible, as soon as I know, versus let this linger for 5 more years before I feel like I'm in too deep.
So was it a gut feeling? Because it feels like the way that you operate when making a big decision, I would go off of gut feeling, but it sounds like you had like an Excel sheet and you had the logistics so like, is that what a gut feeling looks like for you? Is like an incredibly planned out strategy?
Oh, that's so funny. You know what? It's a mix of both because it's one of those things where I know when I've hit my wall with something and it's usually a very clear moment. I had the feeling like, I don't think stand-up's for me, but like it's leading to other opportunities that I might like better, like writing or producing or whatever. So maybe I'll just keep it around, but it's not making me very happy. But then I've shared this before where I had one night where I performed at, one of the best clubs in LA. The set went well, other comedians, complimented it. I had audience members asking for photos and autographs after, all that stuff. Best case scenario. And I walk to my car and I get in my car and I'm so fucking sad. And I'm pretty sure I even cried on the way home. I'm like, if this is the best case, and it would just be this on a bigger scale as I stayed with it and I grew more and more.
More crying?
More crying. I'm like, what am I doing? I don't want this.
As it was happening at the meet and greet and whatever, whenever people are showing up, in your head, were you excited about what was going on, or were you thinking like, I can't wait to get fucking home?
Both. I think in the moment I'm more like, oh, this is cool, and then when I'm by myself it really hits me. When I'm by myself, because it's distracting when you have a bunch of people in front of you, right? And you're like, oh, this
saying accolades and praise, yeah,
right, this is a cool feeling. This is definitely scratching some kind of validation itch I have for sure. But then like when the noise dies down and it's just you by yourself and you're like, oh my God, I feel so empty. Why? Because I was just around all these people and everything went fine. So those are the moments that I hit that wall, and then I really am done. And then the analytical part of me kicks in. Okay, what's my game plan? Well, the first phase is I'm not going to take any shows that are longer than an hour from my house. And then it's 30 minutes from my place. And then it's, and then I start to have all these little, like, how do I scale back over time? Methods while I ramp something else up and I try to figure out what's next. So that's kind of how I made decisions. It's been a mix of everything. It's usually I get a feeling, but it's not super, super clear. I have a moment that hits me in the face and then I make a plan. What about you?
It's like the moment that like you're like you sever the tie. You're like, I'm not wondering anymore.
It's the moment. Exactly. I'm no longer wondering. I've stayed long enough and now it's very clear. And I don't even know what moment I'm waiting for most of the time, but I know when I experience it. What about you? Is it a mix of stuff or is it like, oh, I felt it. I'm done. Moving on. Like, what is it for you?
Usually if I have a big enough feeling, I'll just trust it. And I'm like, oh, well, that's just not meant to be. Yeah. Again, I don't know if that's me being too kind with my own gut or being too kind with my own physiology, because maybe it's anxiety kicking in and maybe I shouldn't be listening to that and I should do the opposite. But usually if I have a big enough feeling, I'll just kind of ride with it. And it's never been wrong. So I don't really have reason to think that I should stop doing that. Yeah. But there are times where I've had to come up with a plan. Like when we first started touring, we were very new to touring. It's very jarring when you first get into it. And people told us to. They were like, your first tour will be your worst tour because this is the tour where you have no boundaries. This is the tour where you're just so excited people want to see you that you are going to overwhelm yourself. You're just going to be so grateful people want you in their city. You're never going to say no. You're going to regret it. You're going to hate it.
Yeah.
And that was very true. Our very first real tour was like almost 50 cities in like 4 months or something, or something crazy. It felt we were just traveling nonstop. And not only that, but because we were saying yes to new cities on the fly, we had a tour that we've already put out, and then we would add dates as we were going. So the traveling wasn't even like smooth sailing. It'd be like, we're going to Dallas, and then we randomly said yes to the show in New York, and then we also randomly said yes to the show in Austin. So now we're back in Texas in the same weekend, and it was just this big headache of flying. We were getting sick all the time. We were sick of each other. It's just a lot to put on somebody because we just kept saying yes because we were like, what if people don't ever ask again? Like, we have to say yes and go to their town. And then we were on the road.
FOMO was kicking in, huh?
Something like that. It was like, it was just like the worry that if we say no this time, then we'll never get the offer again.
Yeah.
And we were at the very beginning of our tour era. And so we thought if we said no, then our booking manager wouldn't put us there ever again. And so we felt like we had a lot of pressure to say yes. And that ended us in a lot of traveling, a lot of venues that did not have bathrooms, didn't have security, didn't have clean food to eat. It just put us in a lot of weird spaces. And so, as predicted by other people in the comedy world who are like, this is going to be a hurdle because you have yet to set boundaries for yourself on the road.
Right.
They were very right. And in between that tour and our next tour, we pretty much said, okay, what are we actually doing? We have to commit to certain things. For example, now we've got a really clean set and everything where we'll say we're going to do this many shows only. We are not going to announce a tour until all of those shows are set because we don't want anyone thinking another city might get added later. So then they don't buy tickets now and then we don't sell out. Every place we go to will regionally be near the other places we're going to in that area. So we're not flying back and forth.
And have a bathroom.
Have a bathroom. That's the first thing on our rider is to have a clean, functional, private bathroom. All three of those things. Because as I'm queer, I'm visibly queer. And Christine has chronic illness that requires her to have a bathroom. And there were so many places where we went where either I didn't feel safe or she didn't have access. And it was just wild how many places would just be like, oh, you need a toilet? It's like, yes, what are you talking about?
Right.
So we have that. There's so many things that, we didn't even have water listed at one point on our rider. We didn't have a rider. We were just like, oh, we're just grateful for whatever. And we had kind of some sort of we hadn't really flushed one out for ourselves is what I'm saying. But we had to come up with all these plans of where are we going to go? How long are we going to be on the road for? There was in our first tour, there was a time where I was gone for 2 weeks. I came back to LA for not even 48 hours to basically do laundry and then go away for another 2 weeks. So I wasn't even home. Our quality of life with our relationships wasn't good.
Yeah.
And so we were we're going to go for this many days max. We're going to do this many legs max. So it ended up working out to set that many boundaries and to put them all into one email and to just press send and hope that it was received well. And just full circle to the beginning of our conversation, we stressed so much. We spent hours writing this email. And as soon as we sent it, the response was, got it.
Yeah. Okay.
What? Got it? Not even a thank you for all the time and effort you put into this. You must have been mulling over it for hours and talking for hours. It was just, it was exhausting to know that we spent, which by the way, not to end this on a fuck the patriarchy kind of thing, but it just goes back to the one of my main tenets these days is in the world of business, handle things like a man, because a man months ago, before we ever had to get to this email, would have just been I'm not doing that. No, I don't want to. I don't want to. But we felt so desperate to say yes that we self-sabotaged for half of our tour, just agreeing to things that we didn't even want to do, or if we did want to do it, it was still inconvenient to our own free time or our, events we had to go to, families we were supposed to see. So the whole thing was a big old self-sabotage in some ways, but
Oh my gosh, yeah.
at some point I feel like we both were just like, this is too much. Our own podcast was suffering and people could tell because we were just so tired when we were talking.
Yeah.
So it just became okay, well, if you have a gut feeling about anything, it's that this isn't working and we need to fix it.
Right, right. I'm so glad you brought this up because it's like, it's amazing when you do ask for what you need and want, how so often you get exactly what you want and need. But
Yes.
you make
Shocking.
you make it this big scary thing in your head. And my gosh, it's like, if we had started doing that earlier,
Yes.
where might we be? Where might we be at this point? And how some people just don't even have that fear around it. There's a few more things on this list I'm curious if you resonate with.
Yeah.
Perpetual self-doubt, self-sabotage. You don't celebrate your wins very much. You just kind of move on to the next thing. And I think that's it for this self-sabotage list. Yeah. Okay. So a couple things. Second guessing yourself a lot. I know I definitely do that. That is definitely like something ingrained in me for sure, where even a good thing, I question it and don't believe it. Maybe it's too good to be true, all of that. And then I used to be somebody who didn't celebrate their wins and I just quickly moved on to the next thing. But now I try to celebrate everything, even the really small, minute things, because that's what's fun. Like when I really think about it, like accomplishing something is fun, but I think the thing that I look forward to the most is like having a celebratory dinner with Cam about it. It's like, well, the thing was fun, but this is, you want to know why though?
Because I said this the last time when I was talking about ADHD. It's because everyone loves a fun little treat, man.
Yes!
Everyone loves reward systems are so important. And we've talked about this exact thing during our weekly tea time. Yes. That I don't celebrate my wins, or I didn't for a long time. But it was in a place where I felt like to celebrate my wins was making other people feel uncomfortable. It was a people pleasing tactic of like, well, I'll put myself, to the side. And I would celebrate on my own a lot, I'm glad I was celebrating, but it is kind of lonely to not celebrate with others. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I'm very good at celebrating other people's wins without even being asked to. Like to an insane level. Like 2 days ago, Allison and I celebrated something that we called Pickle Day because 2 years ago, Allison tried to eat a pickle and couldn't. That's it.
She couldn't.
It was really what it ended up being was it was a celebration that she's gotten through her Invisalign. That was like because 2 years ago, the thing that made her decide that she needed Invisalign was, she's the most beautiful girl in the world. Her teeth were busted. And like we named them. We had little names for all of her teeth. And she had one tooth that she always said was like her real problem child of all the teeth. And she named it Snag-a-Lot. There was a smaller one that was Snag-Lit, and there was Snag-a-Lot. And she always would complain about this like one tooth that always was making things difficult to eat. And so one time we were on a date and she was trying to eat a fried pickle, and Snag-a-Lot really hooked on and wouldn't leave. And like she was like a pickle was just hanging out of her mouth, and she was like weirdly gnawing on it like for like minutes. And it was very, I'm sure, embarrassing for her. It was hysterical for me to watch.
So you've created a whole day to commemorate this, basically.
So now Pickle Day, we've talked about Pickle Day ever since that day, where it's like one day, that was the night where she's like, I'm getting Invisalign, and when I'm done with it, we're gonna come back here and try to eat this fucking pickle because I need to.
Gosh, that is so funny.
So like, anyway, a long story short is that we recently celebrated Pickle Day earlier this week, where she bit into a fried pickle. It was a clean bite. It was like if anyone else had ever eaten a fucking pickle. But like to celebrate anything is like, you like finished with your Invisalign. Now let's go eat the stuff that was like difficult to eat at one point, or
oh my God, it's incredible.
just things like that. I love celebrating other people's wins. And
Yeah.
actually, our conversation that we had privately, where you're like, "Oh, do you celebrate your wins?" That was the first time I realized that maybe it was my own way of people pleasing, so I didn't have to think about my own self. And
Mm.
uh, because if I'm not thinking about my wins, I'm thinking about other people's wins, then I'm not even. I don't have to think about the success that I've had, because if I think about that success, then I feel like it could embolden me to take bigger, scarier risks. So
Mm.
if I don't think about it, then at least like I'm not acknowledging anything that I should go out there and try, and then I get to stay safe here.
Oh, that's interesting. Does it also help you not think about like what if this ends or goes away? Like
Hmm.
by not celebrating, and then like I'm not thinking about the positive or the negative or the neutral part of any of it.
I think about the day the podcast will end every day. It's my biggest fear
Oh
because
wow.
I love this. It's the perfect job. Who would not want this job? It's I get to talk to my friends from
Yeah.
home about whatever I want. That's a pretty good. That's a sweet deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm very lucky. We have such a great audience, and like it doesn't seem like anything's slowing down. Knock on whatever. But I also podcasting is so new that we don't know what it looks like in 20 years and 30 years, and so
Right.
I've never seen a podcast that just goes on for 50 years. I don't know if that exists. I don't know if it ever will. And so, because we're part of this kind of first wave, we also were all going to witness how it ends together. And
Yeah. Oh my God. Good point.
so the what ifs really freak me out at night. I'm like, what if, I don't think we'll ever be like canceled or anything. I feel like, again, knock on wood, but Christine
Yeah.
and I are pretty, you know, pretty open about just about everything. So I'm
Yeah.
not worried about that, but it's like, what if it just fizzles out? Will that hurt my feelings more than if I got canceled? Because at least then I could blame it on something
Oh wow.
versus, what if the numbers just start to drop and why? And then then it feels like a real attack on my character because I'm like, what did I do that made people stop listening? Or it's
That's
so
so
I think
interesting.
I think you're onto something where maybe I avoid my wins because maybe I'm afraid of jinxing myself. That like, oh, that maybe that's the last win we get, you know?
Ooh, yeah. No, that totally makes sense. It's interesting because when I used to not celebrate my wins, there's this thing where, like, yeah, if you don't take time to reflect and pause and celebrate, you're not really sending any signal to your brain that you are accomplishing things or you are building confidence or doing well, right? Like it's just on
Hmm.
to the next thing. So no wonder you're full of self doubt all the time because you're not actually pausing to like signal, like, hey, I've accomplished something.
Such a good
I'm
point.
gonna celebrate it, and I'm going to start that, whatever, create that divot in my brain that gets used to the reward system and also
That's
tells
so smart.
yourself that you're doing it. So I was just on autopilot, but once I started dating Cam, I think he's just better at relaxing and enjoying himself, so that was a very helpful thing for me to see. But then I would get excited to celebrate my wins because I had somebody to celebrate with and I wanted to. So it became a lot easier and more accessible for me with him versus when I was on my own. I'm just like, okay, should I call up a friend? Should I tell my
Right.
family? Should I take a bath? Like, I don't know. What should I do to celebrate? And now it feels like a really easy, kind of fun, collaborative thing of like, how should we celebrate this? And I do that for him too. Of like, what do you want to do to celebrate this thing?
Yeah.
But it is interesting because when you are celebrating, at least for me, when I am taking the time to celebrate, I am very grateful and happy and excited, but that joy is met with a twinge of fear and
Yes. Yeah.
knowingness of like, wow, you better really fucking enjoy this because nothing is permanent
Hmm.
and this will go away at some point in some way, shape, or form. And so it's both. And it is uncomfortable to sometimes pause and celebrate
I think I'm
something.
scared of the twinge because
Yeah.
I love celebrating other people, and if someone's going to celebrate me, I'm all about it, but I am weirdly hesitant to be fully appreciative or like in the moment because there's still this like hidden feeling at the back of my head of like, oh, we're celebrating something that like will be a story one day for the grandkids when this is all over. It's just like I
Right.
think I've got this like weird sense of doom to it. That like
Yeah.
it's the you never know kind of looming. Yeah. It just doesn't. I feel like I let that part take over, even if it's only 5% to my 95% happiness. That 5% feels really potent, and like I feel like I let it seep into things. Um, so I do need to force myself to be more in the moment about the good, like the wins. I catch myself a lot when I'm like on the road. I'm so busy trying to like just make sure like I have a good show and all the travel went well and the logistics are right and I know where I'm going tomorrow. And when I'm in town, if I'm seeing somebody, I'm focused on seeing them. I'm very like uh ironically, for my ADHD, I'm actually very task oriented when I'm traveling because I feel like I've just got to hit all my beats before I get to go home.
Mm.
And then when I'm like lying in bed after the fact, um, like I'm lying in bed like in the hotel, I'm just like, oh my God, like that was really fucking cool. Like I can't believe I got to do that. Like
Yeah.
I was just on a stage and like people knew who I was and like people wanted to see me. That was so cool. And like, but it never hits me in the moment. It's always
Yeah.
a later a realization.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'd
so
imagine you're just trying to like get through it.
get through it.
A
But then
little
when
bit
I
of
finally,
survival mode, maybe.
well, so I've been trying on this tour. We're on tour right now, and when I'm on stage, there's always this one moment. I assigned it before the show ever started, or before we ever went on tour with it. There's this one part in the show where I've let myself treat it as like a trigger of like, this is the moment where you don't have to talk a lot. So just sit and just,
Mm.
you get to look at the audience and
Oh, I
they're
love
not.
that.
And
I
so it's
love
almost like
that.
a part of the script in my head now, like, oh, this is the moment where I get to sit and take it in.
I love that
And
you've plugged in like a mindfulness moment for yourself. That's
it
so smart.
it works really well when you're doing essentially a comedy show with another person because all the eyes are on them for like a good 5 minutes. So I just get to sit there
Yeah.
on a stage and just witness and like nobody's even looking at me to do it. So it's like I get my
Oh, that's
own
so cool.
moment um and it's really helped because before that I was only ever thinking about being on a fucking tour like on my several tours in like I'm lucky enough that I get to do this and it would always be an afterthought and like I already know future me might regret how little I loved it in the moment and I'm afraid of seeing it as like the glory days one day so I really want to
Yeah.
appreciate it while I have it. Best thing I did was like write into my own mental script of like this is where you just get to sit and be amazed at what you've done.
Oh my gosh.
And
So smart. I love that. I'm stealing that tip for myself.
next time
Whenever
you're
I
on a
need it,
stage,
whenever I need it, or just like whenever I know I need it, like,
yeah,
okay, don't forget to plug that in somewhere when you feel like, yeah, maybe you're just not, you're a little bit on autopilot in a way, or you're not experiencing it or reflecting till after the fact when it happens.
yeah,
I'm gonna plug that moment in for myself for sure. I
it's
love that
it's
idea.
it's really helped it because I don't resonate well with the like oh every morning stand in front of the mirror and do your affirmations. That feels fake. That feels like
Yeah.
I might as well just call my friend and like beg her to compliment me. You know, like it feels
It's
a little
never
too
resonated. It's never resonated with me either. I've never actually done it, and when I've done it, it's like it doesn't fit
it
for me or work for
feels
me.
forced. Yeah,
Yeah,
it but
yeah,
like to literally be on a stage and have 1,000 people looking at you, you can't really escape that. So if it's
right.
that it has to be for me, it has to be like a big moment that like you're literally being faced with in the moment versus like just looking in the mirror and being like, I'm nice. Like whatever. So
Yeah,
yeah, if you ever have a big moment, if and you know what's coming up, maybe write it into the
right.
schedule if you're a task person. Be like at 11 o'clock, you're going to just sit and think about what the hell's going on because this is really
Yeah.
cool.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And something that you said about like, oh, I don't want to look back and be like, oh, those were the glory days, and I wasn't like present for it.
Yeah.
I because self-doubt it's on this list, and it's also like, yeah, definitely a part of who I am. I have caught myself looking back and thinking, wow, uh, part of my life might never be that cool again, or I'll never have like moments like that again.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to train my brain I'm trying to tell myself lately, like, my best work is ahead of me and my best life
Mm.
is ahead of me, because I've caught myself, wow, there's part of me that really thinks that the coolest things I've ever done are actually behind me and I'm not going to do anything cool ever again.
Yeah.
And whatever cool means for me in that moment, right? Or I'm never going to have a certain sense of peace or contentment that I had in the past or something. And I have to tell myself like, that's not actually true. And like, that has been, talk about affirmations not really working, but I have been saying those things to myself. They're just not like right when I wake up telling myself I'm beautiful and
Right.
whatever, but they're like when I do catch myself being shitty to myself, I guess I do. I try to tweak the sentence that I'm repeating in my head to something else, whether that's
You
an
know,
affirmation or not. I don't know.
my I want to make sure I remember both points. Uh there's I already forgot one. Back to when we were saying that, like, do we celebrate our wins? I feel like self-doubt plays into that very easily because uh it's really interesting that maybe it's because we're afraid to be proud of ourselves, we're afraid of hurting other people, which feels like self-sabotaging, people pleasing.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm too scared to celebrate my wins with other people because I don't want to put them in a bad space. But that also then leads to me having self-doubt because I'm never encouraging myself or reminding myself of the good that I've done.
Right.
Um, and one of the things that I've had to do, which I do it in my own head because otherwise I look like a crazy person, but in the moments where I need to remind myself that I've accomplished a lot, I learned this from a friend a while ago, where if you can't talk nice about yourself, then what you should do is start the sentence with, if my friend were here, they would say about me.
Oh yeah.
Because
That's
your
really
friend
good.
is going to want to hype you the hell up. And if you're like, if you weren't in the room and someone was like, who's, M. Schulz, and my friend were there, I would hope my friend is going to like gas me up in front of this person and make me look so cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so now when I've had to like either introduce myself in a podcasty way, like if I'm doing like, I don't do many like appearances or anything, but if someone were to ask me, uh, you know, in some Hollywood space, like, oh, what do you do? My
Yeah.
first thought is, oh, my friend would say I'm, and then I just finish the sentence out loud.
Yes. I love that so much.
So
Such a
it's
good
been very
tip.
helpful to like remind yourself of all the cool stuff. Cause sometimes I feel like, oh man, like would like teenage me even think I'm cool? And I'm like, sometimes not. But then there's other times where I'm like, I literally just sold out of like a whole theater of people who wanted to see me. Like, yes, I like to think 16-year-old me would think that's badass,
Yes. Yes.
but I forget it all the time because I'm so worried about other people in my life not feeling. I also am, I'm so terrified of looking like a douchebag, being like, oh,
Right.
well, I did this, blah, blah, blah. So I just never say anything.
Right.
Um, and then I never celebrate myself.
It's really interesting because I feel like being able to openly celebrate your accomplishments with your circle of whoever you want to surround yourself with, I think that's a good litmus test in a lot of ways. Number one, like,
Hmm.
and this is not about like shoving things in people's faces when they're having a really hard time in
Right.
their life, right? Like, somebody's going through a divorce. By the way, I'm engaged, and like, it's not like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it's like it is a good test of like, can you openly celebrate, and what is the reaction to that? If somebody is generally not happy for you, that's a really good indicator that maybe you shouldn't have that person in your life if they actually can't um celebrate with you.
Yeah.
And I've also like unfortunately had confirmation of like I've always been uncomfortable sharing how well things, if things were going well in my life, or if they are going well, I definitely hold back. Um, because I'm afraid of the same thing. I don't want to come off as like braggy or arrogant or whatever. And I was talking to somebody in my life about like, oh yeah, um I didn't tell my friends this thing, and I don't know, I guess I'm just not really comfortable with that. And then the person on the other end of this conversation was like, oh well, yeah, you shouldn't tell people when you're doing well, or that's not very, it's not a kind thing to do, to
Not
tell them,
kind.
to
Oh,
tell them that you're something's going well for you, if you know that they're going through maybe something, a hard time, or they didn't get that thing or whatever. And I'm like, so it is hard, even when it's confirmed, even if I don't agree with that opinion, it is confirmed, like, oh yeah, if somebody is maybe not doing so well, don't tell them about the good stuff in your life. And
yeah.
but then you start to think about like, well, this what if the the person always seems to have something going on to where
Right.
they don't want to celebrate with you. I think that's something different too. But anyway,
I
that
think
that
I
that could be
also,
very muddled.
well, I think I also, yeah, because there's some, I don't know what's going on here today. I feel like even in our own relationship, there are some times where I want to brag about something, and I always preface it with, "I'm not trying to sound like I'm bragging," or like, "I'm not trying to sound like a douche." Like I'm
Yeah.
always so scared of like it being, eaten alive by all my success. But like, I'm just always so worried that like the one time I celebrate myself is gonna look so out of character that maybe I'm changing for the worse in a permanent way, and like. So I always feel the need to defend myself before I brag. And even with people that are in my circle all the time, I feel like I always like I'm trying to prove like, oh, I'm not changing. Hollywood isn't ruining me. Like I
Interesting.
feel
Yeah.
like I need to always be ready to like defend myself, even to my closest people, even like my own girlfriend, my mom. No one has ever suggested that I have a problem with that. I'm just always so
Yeah.
scared of it turning into something.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel a little sad for myself that I always feel the need to have a caveat, but it
Right.
does, help me at the same time of like, oh, maybe this is what I need to just feel good about myself. Is like just maybe it's a reminder to myself that like, oh, you're allowed to feel good, you're allowed to be proud of yourself. Um, yeah, but I don't really know where I was going. I just kind of it just happened.
No, no, it makes me think of like if you are withholding that part of yourself, right? Like anybody, I've done it, you've done it, you're withholding it because again, you're maybe sensing that it wouldn't be received in a certain way or people would think that think a certain way about you. It is like you are stripping the people in your life of having an authentic experience with you where
Yeah,
you're genuinely excited about something and you have no idea what kind of ripple effect that would have on people in your life too of like they might be inspired by your
right.
excitement and it opens up this thing, it opens something up, maybe a conversation or maybe like somebody you give people the hope that they could do something that they've been thinking about, right? But
Hmm.
when we're withholding it, we're cutting that off, we're severing that for other people too.
Right.
You
Yeah.
could think of that like you could be this thing celebrating with people could actually be helping them in some way. And even if they are going through a tough time, they're like, oh, I'm a little sad for me, but I'm happy for Em or whatever.
Hmm.
That's also fine because they need to think about that stuff for themselves too, right? They need to be like, what was I? Oh my gosh, what was I saying the other day? Of like, um, if you are sad around somebody's accomplishments. Oh, we did an episode on jealousy. That's what it was.
Mm.
We did an episode on jealousy with a therapist, and it's almost like if if you feel like a little jealous about something, that can be used as a tool to like uncover what you might want for yourself. And
Yeah.
so instead of avoiding those situations, what would it look like if you kind of got curious about why you were experiencing the jealousy and do you want to do some of the work to get that thing? And it's not even about the
Right.
person that you're jealous of, it's about you. So you could even be doing people a favor too who maybe are a little jealous of your accomplishments, of like holding up a mirror to them saying, oh
Yeah.
shit, I gotta look into this.
I
I
feel
don't know,
like
so much.
I feel like I do get jealous of other people's careers when I see that they're capable of something that I'm knowingly self-sabotaging in my own life because I have so many fears of risk or fears of doubt, and I see that it's possible because other people are doing it, and that's what makes me jealous, where I'm like, oh, like I thought that I wouldn't. What if I came up with a YouTube series and then I see someone else kind of take a very similar idea with a YouTube series and it like takes off and I'm like, oh, well, fuck them. I hate them. I hate them. And it's like, oh, well, actually, I'm just mad that they were able to do it and like their own shit didn't stop them from trying. And it
Yeah.
worked. And then I just get mad where I'm like, oh, now I feel like I lost an idea or I lost a project because now if I did it, it would look like I was copying. So it feels um yeah, I think I'm just jealous of the fact that they can handle risk and I can't, or they're willing to defy the doubts and I'm not. So
Mm,
that's my biggest thing. And it's again, self-sabotaging tactic. So
so interesting.
when it comes to your own experience with self-sabotage or with your gut instincts, I'm
Yeah.
lucky enough that a lot of my gut instincts or my gut feelings are rooted in a positive thing, and or at least
Yeah.
a neutral thing. Very rarely do I ever, I guess, end up in a dangerous situation where my gut has to tell me something bad.
Yeah.
um Usually it's they're neutral to good situations, so I'm guessing this is going to be more self-sabotage. But do you have any tips of like how you get yourself out of it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say, okay, there was a decision that I made a few years back that I I had to remove myself from a situation. And um it was to the point where like when I'd leave the situation, I felt so nauseous,
Hmm.
like so physically ill, and I felt really nauseous around the situation too. So sometimes it's just like my body literally can't handle continuing what I've been doing. Like it's not even a decision.
Wow.
It's not even like a decision I have to make. It's like I actually physically feel ill. Like it feels like a dark, icky energy that I I just truly, it's so uncomfortable to be around that I gotta go. So I
Hmm.
think that's a big one. For me, a big one is truly thinking about best case scenario. And if I don't feel comfortable or happy, or like if best case scenario fits me in a certain situation, then it's not for me, and I feel like I gotta go. Um,
Makes sense.
and yeah, I would say those are some big ones. Listening to my body and like best case scenario. What about
It's so
you?
nice that you're able to listen to your body. I feel like I've thrown my body like down a well enough times in stress that like I'm I can't even read the signals. I feel like I already have like really wild sleep issues. I already
Yeah.
probably always feel a little like an underlying nausea in general. Like I'm always riddled with anxiety. I wouldn't even know how to differentiate when my body's telling me a new thing. Like, so
Right.
at least you're able to sense that. That's something I'm jealous of. I'm like, oh man, you're in tune with your body. That's must be nice.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess when I know when I'm like, I'm about to throw up, I guess I got to make a change.
that's a fair indicator. For me, I would throw up and I'd go, that was weird, and just keep going about my bullshit. Um, no, I think for me, I mean, I really operate very well with I don't know if there's a word to it, but any version of like healing an inner child. So I have a lot of like probably 5-year-old solutions because they're what my inner child can tolerate. And so again, reward systems. I love a fun little treat, FLT.
Yes.
And a lot of times that just means like if I am finally setting a boundary, I get to go have a little drink. I get to go have a fun little coffee. Or
Love it. I
hey,
love that.
you stood up for yourself, or you didn't people please and you said no. Well, guess what? With that time that you all of a sudden have, because you're not going to go people please for the next 2 hours, you can go to Target, buy yourself a cozy little blanket. You know,
Perfect.
I
Perfect.
love anywhere I can put a reward system, I will do it. Um,
Yeah.
and then I also what was another one? Oh, this one's a little odd, but it's helpful for me. Do you have like a feelings wheel?
No, but I should probably get one. Do share.
Well, so a feelings wheel, if anyone doesn't know, a lot of times therapists will have these when they're, helping with like an emotional regulation, not knowing how to identify what you're feeling. A lot of times it's for children, but it's also for people who just have a hard time identifying what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
It's a it's a circle. A lot of times it's a button or a piece of paper or whatever, but it's a circle and it's like a big pizza pie, and all these little skinny pizza slices are all names of emotions you could be experiencing. But it starts with very basic feelings in the middle, like angry, sad, happy, and then it branches out from there into smaller, more defined versions of anger, sad, or happy. So it's a way to just figure
Mm.
out how you're feeling. Um, I have a feelings wheel. I love my feelings wheel. Again, maybe feels like something a 5-year-old should do, but you know what? This is where I say fuck capitalism again, and we're all just 5-year-olds in older bodies, and we all need the exact same
True.
amount of love and validation as we did when we were kids. So I have a feelings wheel.
So
I'm not
good.
ashamed about it.
So good.
And when I think about procrastinating on a task, or when I think about standing up for myself to somebody, or if I'm creating issues in my relationship, which don't happen like nearly as often as I'm probably making it sound, but in moments where I'm, just causing a ruckus for no reason with my girlfriend, I'll look at my feelings wheel and I'm like, what am I feeling? Am I feeling like I just need some attention? Do I just need some validation? Do I feel like I'm not being heard or recognized? Am I scared of an outcome? And so it's the feelings wheel is a little more basic than that. It's like, do you feel embarrassed? Do you feel shy? Do you feel, but still it's like, well, where is that coming from? And so it just gives me a moment to at least have one of the answers to how I'm feeling, and it helps me figure out why I'm feeling that way.
I love it. Such a good one.
And then last thing, or I have a few more, but this is definitely the one that I like the most, or the one I encourage, is baby steps. Because again, talking to my inner child, we all need baby steps. But if you make a deal with yourself to self-sabotage, you can keep self-sabotaging, but like instead of like a 10 out of 10, let's just do like a 9 out of 10,
Mm-hmm.
Like an example of that would be if you're brand new to standing up for yourself in an awkward conversation, to stand up at all. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think I always thought in the black or white of like, oh, I was catering to people and now I need to stop. And that is the goal eventually, but just to help me wiggle my way into a new norm or a new sense of comfort, I'll just like make a comment. And if I feel comfortable just making comments, then maybe later instead of a 9 out of 10, I can drop down to an 8 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. And I can just say, maybe say a little more and stand up for myself a little more and just kind of keep resetting where the comfort zone is. And it's been very helpful because I used to think I can't possibly go from a 10 out of 10 to a 0 out of 10 overnight, which is what most of us hear. But you should champion yourself to just hit a 5 out of 10 one day and just half be able to defend yourself, because that's better than not doing it at all.
Yes, that's a good point. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. I
Mhm.
also like using my past experiences a lot more now. I can trust it more because of the experiences I've had. But like
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known what it was. That's the kind of shitty part of this too, is like sometimes you just have to go through it to
Yeah.
understand what does feel different to you. Like sometimes you just have to have a lot of different instances that make you more aware of what self-sabotage feels like to you and what gut instinct feels like to you. So I feel like I trust my gut more so now, and I can rely on past experiences.
Mm.
But I wasn't always able to do that. So that's kind of a hard part of this, is like, you know, time and experience does play a big factor. And
Yeah.
how can you use those to help you move forward and everything? Also, therapy is great. Therapy
Therapy.
to
Oh, yeah.
understand why you might be self-sabotaging and what that even looks like, because you can't even make any changes if you don't even know what self-sabotage looks like. You might just think
Yeah.
that's normal behavior, that's life. So you can't change something that you're not aware of.
I again, I feel like this may be not everyone's cup of tea, but the way that my brain works is it's been helpful to like kind of come up with an identity for that one feeling I get when I'm self-sabotaging and I can feel it happening. Kind of like that feeling
Yeah.
where you made an investment and you like kind of know that you shouldn't have done it, but like
Right.
that feeling of like I hate this, and like other people would yell at me for having done it, or like if I went to a bar with my drunk friends, would they scream at me because they're a little loosey goosey right now and they're telling me what they really think. Anytime I have that feeling of like a little shame because I know what I'm doing isn't best for me and other people would be able to see it too, I just have a name to it. I'm just like, oh, that's Steve. Fucking Steve just showed up.
Yes,
Like,
I've
and
done
then,
this.
and it's just helpful because instead of like giving yourself a hard time, you can just blame it on Steve and be like, how do I get Steve out of the picture slowly? How do I ghost Steve?
Right, right.
And that's definitely been helpful to um kind of give Steve or whoever an identity. And I have my ADHD would never let me actually keep like a feelings journal, a journal at all. But one thing I have noticed is I do have a running note in my phone where I just press the microphone, just talk about my feelings. And maybe I never read it again. Maybe I never see it.
Ah.
But it's a quick on the go way of having a feelings journal. And just it could just be a note called Steve. And every time you see him, you just log when you saw him. It's like 11 a.m. brunch. He was a real dick. And then just leave.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love putting it like on a notes app. So easy, so accessible.
And then that way you can, if you like write down all the moments Steve showed up, you can maybe start to find a pattern in like what things are really messing with you. And you can figure out what your real insecurities are, where he's more often to show up. So you can even prepare. So if you're going to hang out with somebody and Steve might show up when things get uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny because years ago on the podcast, and what's nice is I guess I haven't really, maybe I should bring her back. I don't know. I used to put a name to like my perfectionism, like personify. I'm like, I feel like she's just a very uptight British woman who's like,
what's her name?
I think I can't remember now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would need our listeners to remind me. Bridget or something, or some kind of situation like that. I can't remember, but it was so helpful because even if I caught myself saying something really mean, I would just try to say it in her voice and think of like how you're not qualified to do that. Like
right.
So laughable and such a helpful tool to like separate yourself from that thought that isn't it's just a thought, and that's fine. But no, I love the notes app thing because that's I would love to be a journaler where I sit down and actually like write pages of things, but
it'll never happen.
It's not how I operate. I usually do it like when I just need a quick brain dump just get something out of me really quick, and there's no rhyme or reason or routine around it. And then a couple other tips that this article shared too is examining your thought, like when it creeps in, like, is there actually any evidence to support this? Is like this fear grounded in any kind of reality? If not, it's usually self-sabotage, right?
So smart.
And like asking for support, like calling up a friend that you trust, saying, this is what I'm thinking, can we talk this through? And they might be able to say, oh, that's a valid concern, or they might be able to give you good advice around it, or be like, no, you're gonna be fine. And then also just considering the timing of when certain thoughts are coming up for you. Are you especially vulnerable or insecure about something right now? And that is likely, you're feeling, uncomfortable about something, and you might have more thoughts around it. And of course, just self-compassion. It's normal. It's human. Just be kind to yourself throughout all of this. Any last tips or words of wisdom?
I think I've given you all of my wisdom.
You've given me so much. We really did a deep dive today. Oh my gosh. This was so fun.
I mean, the irony, like, we haven't even begun because now I feel like I'm just going to go hang out with you on your couch. And I am going to go hang out with you on your couch. But no, this was a good first conversation of the day with you. So
yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You're the best. Anything that you want to plug? I should tell you when this is coming out. Maybe aligns with like a tour date or something. April 1st, April Fool's Day, it airs.
Oh, well, that feels like you did it on purpose. Our show is called And That's Why We Drink. You can find me on social media. I'm VM Schulz, which sounds douchier than it was meant to be. It was a manifestation a long time ago, and it accidentally worked. You can also find our podcast at ATWD Podcast. And we've got a book, A Haunted Road Atlas, if you are into spooky travel guides. We are currently on tour, but the rest of our shows for the year are sold out, or at least for this tour. We're going to be back on the road in the fall, and we'll have new dates for that sometime, but not now.
Amazing. Okay. I love you. You're the best. I'll see you.
Okay.
Thanks again to Em for being the first ever recurring guest host of Self-Helpless. I can't wait for the next one we do together. We have some juicy episodes in the works for you. And I'm going to wrap up with the iTunes review of the episode. This is from Diver Jim, and it says, "Just in love," followed by 6 cookie emojis. Diver Jim, thank you so much. DG, really appreciate you taking the time to do that. It was short, sweet, literally to the point. Loved it. Thank you. Leaving reviews may or may not help the podcast algorithm these days. I truly have no freaking clue. So much has changed, but leaving a review does give me the opportunity to say hi to you directly, to thank you. And I really enjoyed that. So if you'd like to leave a review on your Apple Podcast app, click some buttons, leave some emojis. I'll share it on the next episode. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And if you're still feeling a bit stuck around your feelings, even after tuning into this episode, just remember to be kind to yourself. It can take time and experience to learn how your body feels in the case of gut instinct, and self-sabotage, especially if you think there could be a mix happening. And reach out to people you trust for support. They can really often provide some great perspective if you feel too alone in your own thought spirals. Consider if there's anything in your life happening that's making you feel more insecure than usual. And that's maybe why certain feelings might be coming up for you. Try to catch your negative thoughts and challenge them and reframe them. And when you do gain some clarity, trust yourself enough to take action on what you know deep down needs to be the next step for you. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Helpless Podcast. You can find our Patreon community, merch, and other goodies at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you left an iTunes review, shared this episode with a friend, or post about it on Instagram and tag at Self-Helpless Podcast so we can repost you and say hi. Thanks, everyone.